My friend Josh and we have been saving up some extra money on the side so that we can book a weekend at this Airbnb that we had been looking at for well over 6 months. It was in Portland, Oregon, and it was ridiculously expensive, but we thought it would be worth every penny. After all, it was exactly what we needed. It was a perfect getaway. We could finally be away from work, away from all the unnecessary drama, away from everything, just us two best friends, in a cabin in the woods off some back roads with access to a private lake, and a whole lot of privacy, or so we thought. We traveled in my van, and man, did we bring everything we could fit. I mean it. Like, we probably would not have been able to fit another box in there if we tried. Anyways, it was a nice road trip. I love road trips, and it was only an hour and 30-ish minutes or so of a drive as well, so not too bad. When we got there, it was just heading into the afternoon, so we unpacked everything real quick and had lunch. Just a couple sandwiches and chips. We were trying to decide what we wanted to do for the day. I told Josh I was really looking forward to going out on the boat so we could cruise, and probably go fishing as well. We brought the camp chairs out and sat down for a little while outside in the small porch area that we had. We were just letting everything soak in, relaxing. It was so nice. I remember how happy and excited I was. A little while later, we grabbed our drinks, hopped into our bathing suits, brought some snacks, our fishing gear, and a few other things so we could enjoy our day out in the water. We actually both caught a bass, and we were pretty happy with that, so we decided it was time to cruise. We spent about 20 minutes maybe just speeding through the lake. We wanted to get back home soon though, so we could get ready for dinner and figure out what else we wanted to do while we still had some daylight left. Now keep in mind, the cabin we were staying in, there were no other cabins or people or anything of that nature for at least a mile radius that we knew of. So we had all the freedom to do what we wanted, as loud as we wanted. It was literally so beautiful. We were surrounded by trees and nature. It was just pure bliss. Right in front of our cabin was a long trail that led to a lake. The scenery is something out of a movie. Anyways, it was getting late. After we ate dinner, we decided to hang out by the fire for a bit. We stayed out there for a few hours, having a few beers and such. It was a long day though, so we were beat by like 11 o'clock. We both woke up really early that morning, and we had a long drive, and we had been in the sun all day. Plus I only got a few hours of sleep the night prior, so we both ventured off to bed. We were just cleaning things up real quick outside before we were heading in for the night. And that's right when I saw something. I saw a tall, shadowy figure out of the corner of my eye. What the? I thought to myself. I rubbed my eyes in hopes I could see a bit clearer, but it was gone when I opened my eyes. That was very strange, but we're in the woods, so I just played it off as it could be anything and that it probably wasn't anything harmful. I had a bad feeling though, I'm not going to lie. I didn't tell Josh about it though, because I didn't want to seem like I was scared or crazy, you know? But maybe I should have, and I wish I would have got a better look the first time, because maybe we would have been able to do something sooner, rather than be awoken to an ominous light tapping noise on the front door. Josh was out cold, but I heard it right away. At least I assumed, because I'm a light sleeper and I was very on edge. Josh, dude, wake up. He was in a dreamlike state for a moment, but he awoke fairly quickly. Dude, there's someone at our door. What? He quickly went over to the door like he was about to open it. Dude, are you kidding me? Don't open the door, what are you, nuts? I whispered. Also guys, like I said, please understand that this was a huge red flag. We were literally a mile into the woods on private property. I explained that to him and reiterated it multiple times before he realized too that something was wrong. The knocking continued, except louder this time. Hello? The man said from behind the door. Unfortunately, we couldn't get a good look at him through the window from anywhere in the cabin because of where he was standing. He was like sort of in a blind spot. He started banging on the door profusely, no words though, but very aggressively nonetheless. Dude, get out of here, right now. Leave. I don't care what you want or who you are. Leave now. Do not make me tell you again. Josh was practically yelling at this point. This was really strange because he only kept knocking and he didn't say anything. I don't know, but that sounds like some serial killer shit to me. I didn't know at the time, but apparently Josh had a concealed weapons permit, meaning he could carry legally. He pulled it out and opened the door slowly. He didn't have his gun drawn at him yet though. We both stepped back a few steps as he opened the door. The man was standing and staring, looking directly at us. He had a black ski mask on and an all camo outfit and gloves on. He was probably like 6'4", 6'5". The man saw that Josh had a gun and he took off running. Josh kind of followed after him a bit and yelled at him not to come back, or next time you won't be able to run away, he yelled. I kind of started having a panic attack a little. Dude, that guy was absolutely nuts. What the hell even was that? We couldn't believe that just happened. I'm not sure if he was trying to prey on someone who he thought was alone, or if he was just trying to rob us, or if he was only just trying to scare us, or who knew what he wanted. But we ended up staying the rest of our time there at the Airbnb because we already paid for it and we didn't want to let some jerk ruin it for us. We didn't think he was coming back anyways. I mean, it wouldn't be very smart of him to do so. We enjoyed the rest of our time there, a little bit more on edge than usual, but he never came back. When I was in college, I was on the wrestling team. We would usually all travel together in small groups, but I had to travel by myself this one particular time. So I ended up getting an Airbnb by myself. It wasn't my first choice, but it was either that or I wouldn't have been able to make it to my tournament. I met the host at the small one-bedroom loft that I was staying in. He was a man maybe in his late 40s, quite tall, and was balding. He showed me around and he honestly seemed quite nice. He left shortly after and I was just getting settled in. I didn't do much besides order a DoorDash and watch TV, as I had a big day tomorrow, so I wanted to make sure I had enough rest. Fast forward to around 10:30 p.m. I was just getting ready for bed. I heard some strange noises outside, and then someone talking. I couldn't make out what was being said, as it was very muffled sounding. I didn't think too much of it, and I forgot about it a few minutes later. I left the room I was sleeping in for the night so I could get a drink of water and use the bathroom before I went to sleep. As I left the bathroom, I heard someone talking again, except this time they were closer. I was a little concerned, so I walked out into the living room to investigate a little further. As I made my way out there, I soon realized that the doorknob was being fiddled with. There were no other doors in the loft, so the only way out was one of the windows if I needed a quick escape, had someone broken in. I panicked. I had to make a decision quick. I went into the bedroom to try and figure out what I should do. I stayed in there for a few minutes. There was a brief silence for a moment, so I slowly crept out back into the living room to see what was going on. I peeked around the corner and saw that the door was wide open. I didn't know if that meant he was somewhere in the house or if he was coming back, but I didn't care. I really didn't want to find out. I kinda saw that as it was my time to run. I crawled out one of the back windows and hopped over a fence into this creepy, dimly lit alleyway. I found somewhere safe to call the police. When they showed up, there was no one to be found. No sign of a break-in, and the front door was closed. There was literally nothing that was stolen. No damage, anything. Nothing out of the ordinary at all. When I told the host about what happened, he wasn't acting right. He didn't seem anywhere near as concerned as he should have been. I thought that was extremely weird and a huge red flag. Especially that nobody took anything either and that the front door was shut when the police arrived. I called my friend that let me stay with him for the night in his motel room. I had to sleep on the ground, but luckily my buddy had a sleeping bag he let me use, which was a bit better than nothing. I'm never using Airbnb again. I travel a lot, sometimes with friends and family, but often I travel alone. Some people think it's weird, but it's one of my favorite things to do. See new places, do new things, try new foods, and meet new people. You know, that sort of thing. I was visiting Miami Beach, Florida this particular time. I rented out this Airbnb nearby. It wasn't anything super fancy and it was quite small, but it was decent inside, like I said. It was nothing out of the ordinary though. It definitely wasn't the most upkept or clean like in the pictures either, but it was alright. I'm not super picky and generally a very easygoing and understanding person. It did bother me just a bit, but I forgot about it shortly. I actually ended up doing some cleaning when I got there because I'm kind of OCD and I like things to look nice and neat. Everything was completely normal. I spent the day walking around the beach, visiting local shops and stores. I went to this Italian restaurant and I really enjoyed myself. It was a normal day, nothing out of the ordinary at all whatsoever. Before bed, I like to read usually. It helps me get relaxed and plus I just love reading. It was just like any other night. The only difference was I was in a different area. I heard a strange beeping sound as I was dozing off. It wasn't super loud, but it was loud enough to where it alarmed me, and it slightly triggered my fight or flight mode for a brief moment upon awakening. I couldn't tell where it was coming from. It started beeping more. It was like once every 15 to 20 seconds or so. I thought it might have been the fire alarm or something, because sometimes when a fire alarm is low on batteries or something's not right with it, it will beep constantly every 20 seconds or so until it gets the attention it needs. So I went out in the living room area to find the fire alarm. I soon found out quickly that that noise most definitely wasn't the fire alarm, because I kept hearing the noise and that's not where it was coming from. I learned that it was most definitely coming from the bedroom. I was very quiet so I could listen to where it was coming from exactly. As I started getting closer, all it took was a few more beeps before I found what I would soon find to be the most uncomforting and disturbing thing that has ever happened to me. There was a teeny tiny camera lens that was poking through the wall at the top left corner of the bedroom. It must have been rigged inside of the wall somehow. I don't know, but I freaked out immediately and left the bedroom, went out into the kitchen, and I started pacing back and forth. I started getting rightfully worried that there were other cameras in the house. I searched everywhere for more. I found 3 more. One in the living room, and I'm not kidding, there were 2 more in the bathroom. One was pointed at the shower inside of it, and one was pointing outside of the shower. I felt so violated. I couldn't stand another second of being there. I called my mom, bawling my eyes out, and then my husband. They told me I needed to leave. I gathered my things and got out of there as quickly as possible. I worried that if whoever put those cameras there saw that I found out about them, that they would try to come here and hurt me or something before I could leave. I stayed at a nearby motel for the rest of the night, and I fell asleep on FaceTime with my husband. The next morning, I went straight home. I called the cops, and when they got there, they said there were no cameras, but there were double fist-sized holes in each of the areas where I explained the cameras were. Whoever was responsible for putting them there showed up before the police could, so they could destroy the evidence. The charges were dropped because I couldn't prove anything. I wish I would have taken pictures, but I was in too much of a panic, so I didn't really think of it until it was too late. I love October and the months around it. Spooky season has always been my favorite time of the year. It was Halloween night, so my group of friends and I were really excited. We had been waiting for weeks for Halloween to finally come around. I was only 14, and all 4 of my friends were roughly the same age as me. We all ranged from 13 to 15 years old. This was like 10 years ago, but it's a story I still like to tell from time to time. My friends and I had been waiting for 7:30 to finally roll around, so we could finally go out and walk around the neighborhood to get our candy. My parents were scolding me and my friends to not knock on the door or to trick-or-treat at all at one specific house. We didn't understand why, and I didn't really care if I'm being honest. You know how teenagers are. Goes through one year and not the other year sometimes. I reassured her that I would make sure none of us went up to that house. To be honest with you, I didn't even know what house she was talking about, but I just pretended like I did so we could finally be on our way. I mean, every second of not trick-or-treating was another second we were wasting our time not getting any candy. Every year we would always try to get the most candy as fast as possible. It was sort of a competition between my friends and I. We were finally off to the first house right next door. We were also excited that after only maybe 10 or 15 houses, we ended up splitting into 2 different groups. It was me, Jimmy, and Kyle. Josh and Connor ended up doing their own thing for a bit, but we ended up running into them maybe 30 minutes later into the night anyways. Usually I always listen to my parents, but honestly I thought they were just trying to play a Halloween scare on me. What's the worst that could happen anyway? There's 5 of us total, and we would be able to defend ourselves if anything were to happen. Whoa, look at that house, said Jimmy. Yeah, it looks really cool. We all agreed and headed over to it. It was like a smaller size Victorian styled house, so it was extra creepy on Halloween. And as we were all walking up the steps, wait, Kyle said, that's the house your parents told us not to go to. The house on the end of Bay Street, and this is exactly what your mom described to us. Come on, let's turn around. Dude, are you kidding me? Stop being a pansy, I said. I've lived in this neighborhood here all my life. It's not that big of a deal. What, are you scared? There was absolutely no light coming from the house at all. I'm not gonna lie, I was a little nervous, but I was really curious. As we all were, we made our way up to the porch finally, and we were all cracking sarcastic jokes. We were talking about how it looks abandoned and that it's probably haunted, and how a demon is probably going to jump out and take Kyle for being so scared. I knocked on the door and we all said trick or treat. We waited. Hello, trick or treat. Give us our candy, old man. Get the hell off my porch, a strange man said, coming from inside. We all ran. Okay, yeah, I was a little scared, I'm not gonna lie, but I thought it would be funny if we came back a few minutes later to mess with him further. Yeah, thinking about this now, I know it was unbelievably immature, but I've grown up since then completely. We finished trick-or-treating, and I said my goodbyes to my friends. Josh ended up staying the night at my house though. We thought it would be hilarious if we snuck out after my parents fell asleep and went back to that house, so that's what we did. On our way there, we were trying to figure out what we would do. We didn't know what else to do other than to ding-dong ditch the house. You know where you knock on someone's door and run away and hide before they come out and find you? Yeah, I used to love doing that with my friends. This was more intense though. This house had a crap ton of stairs we had to run down first before we could get away. Josh and I both counted 3, 2, 1. We both banged on the door at the same time like 5 times each and yelled trick or treat as loud and annoying as possible. We booked it down those stairs. I almost tripped and fell, but luckily I caught myself before I did. The strange man came out with a rifle and said, "You goddamn kids, y'all better not live to see another day." He pointed it at us and actually shot. He shot like 4 or 5 times. He didn't land any of his shots on us at all, thankfully. We were able to walk away unscathed physically, but mentally, yeah, I think that screwed me up for life in some way. We ran home immediately and we couldn't decide if we should tell my parents what happened. We both decided that we had to, even if it meant we would get in trouble. We told my parents everything and they called the police. The police showed up and arrested the man, but the charges ended up getting dropped because he was deemed mentally insane. I was too young to understand then, but apparently the old man living there was a retired Navy SEAL vet who had severe post-traumatic stress disorder and was into the beginning stages of dementia. Apparently my parents kind of grew up around him because their parents knew him very well. My grandpa actually served with him in the Navy. The old man got sent to some sort of group home where he will live the rest of his life. My mom sent me to boot camp for the next 3 summers and I was never allowed to go trick-or-treating again, nor was I allowed to hang out with Josh ever again. 2 years ago, me and my girlfriend went to this haunted house that was like an hour away. We searched through Google for the best haunted houses near me. We thought it would be like a fun Halloween day. We went to this one specifically because it had the most 5-star reviews out of all the other haunted houses that showed up on Google under 2 hours away. This was not what we thought it was going to be at all. We found that out almost as soon as we got there. It wasn't one of those haunted houses that you go through, pay to have people scare you with fake props and such. No, this place was actually haunted. When we got there, we realized it was like an entertainment museum. This building is unoccupied now, of course, but it used to be a hotel of some sort that also used to be a mansion before that in the 1800s. We were told that a lot of bad things have happened here. Death, abuse, misery, suicide, and even unexplainable murder mysteries. We were accompanied by a group and a museum docent who was showing us around and telling us the history of the place. You were allowed to roam by yourself or stay with the group, so my girlfriend and I decided we wanted to explore it for ourselves. So we headed off and did our own thing. This place was gigantic. I mean, when I say a mansion, I mean a mansion. Huge staircases, gigantic chandeliers everywhere, historical paintings, ruby red carpets. I mean, it was insane. I couldn't imagine how much this place was worth. We found our way to the basement. Holy shit, was this place creepy. I've never been one for believing in ghosts or stuff like that, but after this night, you cannot convince me otherwise that there isn't some sort of energy that we as humans cannot or just do not see in certain places at certain times. I know you're probably thinking I sound crazy, but just hear me out. Walking down those steps and hearing the floorboards creak every step of the way down only added to the eeriness. I had this impending doom feeling, almost like my soul left my body and was trying to push me back up the stairs because that's how gut-wrenching it felt. When I made it all the way down the stairs and took my first look at the basement, I'll try to describe what I saw, but really it would never even come close to doing justice for just how disturbing I felt. I paused. The door behind us slammed. I immediately turned around and looked up the stairs. Haley. What? Hello, what the hell? She was gone. There's no possible way that she could have been gone. She was with me holding my hand the entire time. I ran up the stairs and ran around looking for her. I couldn't believe what was happening. I couldn't find her anywhere. I called her and she picked up almost immediately. Hey, you okay? Where are you at? Haley said. I've been waiting for you for like 10 minutes. What? What do you mean? You were just with me. We were just going to check the downstairs area out. Huh? What are you talking about, Alex? She said. I asked her to stop messing with me and that I'm really freaking out and that it's not funny anymore. She finally told me where she was. Stay put, I said. So I angrily hung up the phone and made my way to her. I could tell that she wasn't lying and that she was telling the truth. But I don't know how to explain it because she was with me until that moment I turned around downstairs. She promised on my life and our whole entire relationship that she has no idea what I was talking about. I told her we had to leave and that I felt like I was going insane. I explained everything to her on the way home. Luckily, she believed me for the most part, I think. That place is so messed up. I could not even begin to explain how confusing that was for her and I. I'm pretty sure Haley thinks I'm absolutely stone cold nuts. Sometimes I wonder if I am too. And honestly, I don't blame her. I mean, how else could I describe what happened that night? To me, she was there the whole time, but to her, she wasn't. And I know what you're thinking. That maybe I have some psychological or severe psychiatric disorder or something of that order. Well, I don't. And I've never had any sort of mental illness at all through my life. And I have also been evaluated 3 or 4 times now by mental health professionals who said there was nothing wrong with me mentally. I still don't know what to make of this, but it disturbs me greatly to even think about. Okay, so this story took place last year towards the end of October, just before Halloween. Do you know that seasonal fall feeling you get in the US? More specifically the Midwest states. It's such a different feeling than the rest of the year. The cooler weather, with the higher mile-per-hour winds, and the sun not being out as much, just adds to the ambient feeling I'm trying to describe. Especially at night, or dusk even, and with Halloween only being a few days away, it just adds to the eeriness. I love this time of year though, so I'm not complaining at all. I live in a small city, and I live in the downtown area of it, in a medium-sized neighborhood. I have a car, but my house is walking distance between almost everything I need to get to daily. I ride my bike a lot through town, all around the area. I have a route that I usually do once or twice a week. It's probably a 4.5 mile bike ride. Sometimes when I'm really bored and don't feel like biking, I'll walk the route instead. Sometimes I'll do a light jog here and there as well, but I have severe asthma, so I try not to overdo anything. One night when I was riding, it was a little bit later than usual. I was making my way to this park that I like to ride through sometimes. It has a nice park trail I like to go through. The park closes at dusk, and it was already dark outside. I knew it was closed, but I felt like it wasn't a huge deal and that it couldn't hurt, so I rode through anyways. After all, I've done it many times with no trouble at all. I have reflective lights on my bike and a flashlight geared to the front of my handlebars as well. All of a sudden, it became clearer as I was getting closer. There was a strange figure in the distance. As it got even closer, I was able to shine my flashlight at whatever the shadowy figure was. Well, it wasn't just a shadow. It was a human being dressed up as a clown. What the hell do you want? Who are you? There was pure silence for a moment. Dude, seriously, please stop. This time a bit more demanding. Dude, I'm not going to tell you again. Get the hell away from me. I was trying to seem like I wasn't scared, but deep down I was shitting myself. He started walking towards me slowly. Right then and there, I turned around and booked it all the way home. Thank God I was on my bike. Had I been walking that night, it would have been nothing short of a foot race. I made it back home safe and sound. This still gives me the heebie-jeebies to think about. What makes this even scarier was there was not one single car at the park, so more than likely it was just me and him there. Why else would he be there alone? Was he even alone? I don't know what's worse, but there is no single doubt in my mind he was going to try and hurt me. Me and a couple friends last year decided we wanted to go camping. We wanted to do something we usually wouldn't do, for fun. And this is what we all agreed to. This was completely out of character for us, but it was just us boys, a few tents, and all the food we thought we would need for the weekend. This wasn't your average campground. It was in the middle of the woods, off some back roads in a small town in Tennessee. We're more of suburban kids, so it was a bit of a culture shock for us, but nonetheless, we were excited. Shortly after we arrived and got camp set up, we met some locals who told us something about this place being haunted, and that there were very strange things that happened here during the night only. Something about some sort of beast, or a weird old creepy man? I don't know. I wasn't even listening because I thought it was pathetic. We thought they were just trying to mess with us and joke around or whatever. Of course I didn't believe it. I mean, like, seriously, are you kidding me? I'm not 12. We arrived late afternoon. So after setting up camp, there wasn't much to do other than hang out by the fire and drink some beers. We were all having a blast. We started telling each other scary stories for fun and to add to the camp atmosphere vibe, if you will. We got s'mores and hot dogs out and completely pigged out. After a few hours of being boys and getting absolutely wasted, it was off to bed. We had to wake up early tomorrow morning because we all planned to go fishing at a nearby lake within walking distance. I couldn't sleep right away because I had to pee really bad. I couldn't find my flashlight, so I said to hell with it. I walked over maybe 30 feet from camp and peed by a tree. It was pitch black, and I mean as black as it gets, especially with the fire being almost all the way out. I heard something rustling before me in the woods. Whatever, I thought. It's probably just a bunny or a deer, you know, like something harmless. Even though initially it spooked me, and that was only because it caught me off guard and you can't see a damn thing. I couldn't even see my own hand in front of my face. I made my way back to my tent, got in my sleeping bag while trying my best not to wake anyone up. I tried to fall asleep, but I couldn't. I was having some anxiety, and I'm a light sleeper, so hearing everyone snore was driving me nuts. Within an hour, I started to doze off, but then, all of a sudden, I awoke to rustling in the leaves. It was a lot louder this time, and whatever the hell it was making a very strange noise. Almost what you would expect a wild beast to sound like. Yes, I said beast, because I don't know how else to describe it. I immediately thought of what those locals told us, and I was thinking, no. Calm down, I'm overreacting, I told myself. There's no such thing as monsters. Yeah, you could say I was scared shitless, but my friend sleeping next to me woke into panic as well. What the hell, Darren said. Dude, what is that? Is that a bear? I don't know, but what should we do? We both kind of sat there for a moment while we tried to piece together what the next move was. We didn't want to run, because if that was a bear and it started chasing us in the middle of the night, I don't imagine that would end well for us. I was sitting and I was thinking, well, it's probably smartest for us to just stay in here and wait it out. So that's what we did. We sat there in silence for about an hour, whispering here and there. Darren fell back asleep shortly after, but I still couldn't sleep knowing there was something out there. Call me a wimp or whatever, but I'm sure most of you would be freaking out too. I lied awake most of the night, just like hours of just thinking. I think I dozed off again for a moment, and I heard whatever the hell that thing was again, messing around with some of our belongings at camp this time. It was about morning by now, so there was a little bit more light. I opened my tent, looked outside, and I shit you not, there were 3 black bears looking directly at me. Okay, so it was a monster, just not the type of monster the locals warned me about. They started making their way towards me slowly. I started yelling at them, hey, get back, go away. Guys, wake up, help. Everyone got up slowly, but thankfully a few friends of mine woke up in time. As we were all yelling at them, it didn't take long before the bears ran away. Had I been alone, who knows what would have happened. I'm just thankful my friends were there. We ended up staying another night at camp and the bears didn't come back. That was probably a bit risky, but everyone left unharmed, thankfully. My family and I go camping 3 or more times a year at all different types of campgrounds across the US. This particular time we were in Indiana. I can't remember the city because I was so young, but it was a Yogi Bear Jellystone campground. I love this place to pieces and I've been here over 5 times throughout my life. One of the first times we went, something horrible happened. Keep in mind, I was only a kid at the time. I had made some friends my age at the park. We did all sorts of things. Played basketball, went to the arcade, went swimming and fishing. You name it and we did it. It was a lot of fun and everything was going great. We were staying there for a couple weeks too, so I had lots of time. My friend Jake on this particular evening mentioned that we should take a walk through the trails. Of course I was interested. It was like one of the only things this place had to offer that we hadn't explored yet. As we were exploring the trails, we realized it was a lot bigger than we thought it was, so only shortly after we decided it was time to go back to the campsite. It was getting dark, and park curfew was 9:30 anyway, so we had to head back soon. We waited for our parents to go to sleep for what felt like forever. We decided that it would be fun to go walk through the trails with our flashlights given how dark it was. I know that sounds silly, but we were kids, so I'm sure you can understand why that might sound fun for some crazy teenagers. On our way there, Billy was freaking out because we were breaking the rules and he was a goody two-shoes, so he wimped out and went back to camp. I wish we all would have done the same because maybe my friend would still be alive. So, it was only me, Jake, and Carter. Carter was older than us, so I guess he thought it was funny. He ran away from us and hid. He was just trying to scare us. We spent at least 10 minutes looking for him before he finally jumped out and scared the hell out of us. I was kind of irritated, but we laughed it off. At this point, we had been walking for maybe 20 minutes, not really paying any attention to where we were walking. Jake and I were starting to get worried in hopes we weren't lost. Carter thought it would be funny to continue messing with us, so he ran off and hid on us again. Eventually we got sick of looking for him, so we yelled that we were leaving if he didn't come out. I felt bad for ditching, but I was sick of him messing with us and he knew it. So we turned around and started making our way back. A few minutes after walking, I heard screams. It was Carter. We thought he was just messing around with us still, so we continued walking. A brief moment later, I realized something terrible was happening. He was screaming at the top of his lungs. There's no way he was that crazy or that good at acting. We immediately ran back to our parents. I mean, I've never ran that fast in my life. I told my family what was going on, and we all went looking for him. My mom stayed at the camper and called the police. The park security got involved, and the rangers were giving my dad a hard time and not taking us seriously at all. One ranger was practically hounding my dad the whole time. We couldn't find Carter. We had been searching for over an hour. Nothing. There was no sign of him anywhere. Carter's parents were freaking out and blaming my parents for everything. Eventually they kicked my family out of the park and we weren't allowed back until next year. They never found Carter to this day. I blame myself for his disappearance. The guilt haunts me every single day that I should have done something different. I used to love camping, but I am completely traumatized from a few years back. I'm not sure if I'll ever go camping again. So here's my story. We went camping one summer, like we always did. I grew up at this campground. Well, not really, but like I've been camping here with my family since I was a baby. In 2016, I was 14 years old. It was our first day camping of the year. Everything was normal, except this time I was a year older and I didn't have any friends with me. I'm not an only child. I do have a little sister, but she's 7 years younger than me. So as you can probably figure, we don't have too much to relate on. I was kind of alone. I would go to the park alone, get ice cream alone. I mean, my parents didn't let me do whatever I wanted all the time, and I did spend time with them too, but a lot of the time it felt like I was alone. I would ride my bike around the campground a lot. That's mainly what I did when I was bored. This campground was pretty big in space, but it's not your typical campground, where there are motorhomes, tents, fifth wheels, etc. lined up right after another. There were lots more space in between, filled with tons of trails and all different types of trees. You get it. It was a nice campground. There was a really creepy cabin I used to pass by all the time when I was riding my bike. The cabin was pretty far from my campsite, and pretty far from any other campsite as well. It looked empty, you know, like no one was camping there during that time. One day when I was riding by, I saw that the front door was cracked open. I mean, I have rode past this cabin at least 50 times in the past 4 to 5 days, and I knew for a fact there was no one camping there. Or so I thought. Geez, I just wish I never would have gone in there. Of course, my curiosity got the best of me, and I ever so slowly made my way up the couple steps onto the porch and slowly pushed the door forward. It was so eerie because the door was creaking the whole time. Probably for like 15 seconds. It was very cringe sounding. Who's there? I stood in complete silence, eyes wide, and my mouth dropped to the floor. The old man standing right across from me told me to come inside and reassured me it was okay. I turned around to leave, and immediately he yelled at me and told me to come back. I took off on my bike and drove away as fast as possible. There was nothing that really happened after that. I don't know what he wanted, but good thing I didn't have to find out. I went home in a panic. I didn't tell my parents because I was too scared. I don't know why, but the next day I drove past the cabin again. There was no sign of him. I know now that he was definitely trying to lure me in, and who knows what he was going to do. I hadn't seen him again until the last day of camping. I was at the arcade playing this basketball game. He came up right beside me and said, "Hey kid, how come you didn't want to hang out?" This guy, I still remember his face. He was really tall, skinny, old, and had long white hair and some beat up old clothes. His teeth were all jacked up and stained yellow as well. He gave me the weirdest smile ever and told me I was a clever little one. He then winked at me and walked away. I've never seen him again after that. We left the campground the next day and I still never told my parents. I don't know why, I just didn't think I needed to. That guy was definitely a predator and was definitely trying to prey on me. It didn't work on me though, and God forbid it doesn't work on anyone else. When I was 15, I was looking for a new PlayStation on Craigslist. I've always heard that Craigslist could be sketchy, but it was the cheapest place I knew of that I could get my hands on one. My PS4 had broken a few days prior, so I really wanted a new one as soon as possible. As I was browsing through listings, I saw one that caught my eye. The price the guy was asking for it seemed pretty low. Almost too good to be true low. But as I said before, I was desperate at this point, so I went ahead and contacted the seller. We had arranged to meet up later that day. Nothing seemed to be weird just yet. However, when it came around time to meet, just 30 minutes before, he asked me if we could reschedule to a few hours later than we originally planned. I said sure, but I was a little annoyed at this point because it was already 5 p.m. and I'm from the Midwest. It was also winter, so it's pretty much pitch black by 7 p.m. I decided to just say screw it and meet up with him a few hours later. I told my parents I was going to the store and I would be back in a few. I knew if I told them what I was doing, there's no way in hell they would let me go. I know that was wrong of me to lie, but I was a dumb teenager. What can I say? Anyways, on my way there I got this intense gut feeling, like something was wrong. At this point it was like 8:30 p.m, so it didn't help that it was extremely dark outside. I live in a slightly rural area, so that kinda added to the eeriness if I'm being honest. After a moment of driving, I received a notification on my phone. It was a text from him. I don't remember his name, so I'll just call him George from now on. He was asking me if I could just come to his house instead of meeting at the park like we had talked about previously. Immediately, I knew in my heart something was off. I just really wanted the PS4, and I was already upset that he delayed our meetup. And I didn't want to come back empty-handed and drive all that way for nothing. I made the biggest mistake I've ever made in my life by going to his house that night. When I got there, the vibe was off. I can't explain how I felt, but the way I was feeling was something I've never experienced. Being the dumb, naive 15-year-old I was, I proceeded to knock on the door. The house looked really old, and it was dimly lit up. Almost no light at all coming from the house. Like I said before, this was in a pretty rural area, so there weren't many other houses around. On my way up to the porch to knock on the door, I started to second guess myself. Like maybe I should just turn around. I don't know why, but I didn't. I really wish I would have though. I'm not going to lie to you, at this point I'm shitting bricks. I knocked on the door ever so lightly. He opened the door almost immediately, with the PS4 in his hand, and introduced himself. It was like he was waiting there for me or something. He asked if I'd like to come inside and see him turn the PS4 on, and that everything works properly before I buy it. I sat there briefly in silence for just a moment. I stuttered, no thanks, I'm good. He gave me a kind of a weird look, like I maybe offended him or something. I gave him the money and he handed me the PS4 and some extra stuff that came with it in a box, like games, a controller, and all the cords it needed. He asked me if I was sure that I didn't want to come inside and check that it works before I take off. I told him that I really had to get home because my parents have a curfew for me, and I'll be in big trouble if I'm not home on time. After I said that, he had this dark and evil look in his eyes. It was a good thing I was standing 6 feet or more away from him because he quickly reached out for my arm and tried to grab me and pull me inside. I immediately dodged his attempt and took off running and screaming to my car. I swear I've never ran faster than that in my entire life. Despite running fast, it felt like forever before I got to my car. I had to run down steps and it was dark, so I had to be careful I didn't fall. He was an older man and relatively out of shape. I assumed that just from looking at him. So I didn't think he could catch me. But still, my heart was racing so fast I thought I was going to have a heart attack. The whole way to my car he was screaming at me, calling me every name in the book, and said I was lucky that I got away, otherwise I'd be in his basement right now pleading for help. Like you deserve, he said. When I got in the car, he was only halfway to me. I took off so quick and never looked back. Come to think of it now, I don't think that was really his house. It had to be abandoned or something. Either way, I don't know and I don't care. I'm just happy I'm okay. I still have nightmares about this quite frequently. I've never told anyone about this before, nor will I ever. Especially not my parents. They would kill me. Anyways, I learned a lesson that night that I'll never forget. I really needed some extra money when I was a teenager a few years back, so I looked online at Craigslist for some opportunities to potentially make some money. I wasn't really expecting anything to come out of it at all actually. It was just the morbid curiosity of that I might have been able to strike gold and find something good. What I found was an ad that said they needed someone to help with some yard work. It caught my eye because the person who posted the ad was in the same city as me and only a few miles away. I knew this because I live in a small town, and I mean really small. No more than 10,000 people live here. It said they would pay $150 for around 2 to 3 hours of work. I immediately jumped to it and contacted him. He said he was too old to be doing this type of work and that he really appreciates me coming out to help him. He seemed like a good man and very nice over the phone, so I didn't think much of it. He asked if I could come out the next morning, and I said of course. I told my mom what I was doing and where I was going, and she was okay with it. Slightly concerned, but she was okay with it. I have my own cell phone, so if anything were to go wrong, I could call someone immediately for help. Everyone in the town where I live are very nice and friendly people anyways. Almost no crime here at all, and generally a safe area. Everyone knows everyone here. Any sort of crime is almost completely unheard of. Anyways, when I got there the following day and I met the man I was helping out for the day, who we'll call Bob, everything seemed pretty normal. He showed me what he wanted me to do. He explained he wanted me to rake up some leaves in the front yard, pick up some sticks and debris, and pull the weeds out of his mulch/garden bed and driveway, and all around the house as well. He explained that he had everything I needed for the job, and that I can use his tools. He gave me gloves, a rake, some yard waste bags, and an empty garbage can. We made small talk for a moment, but then he started asking me a lot of questions. Nothing weird at first. He asked me how old I was, where I was from, and what my name was. I proceeded to tell him my name and that I was from the same town, just a few miles down the road. That's when everything took a sharp turn. He started asking me some very strange personal questions that I don't even feel comfortable sharing right now. I'll let you take that how you decide. Just know they were not appropriate questions to be asking a 16-year-old whom you just met. I was very short with him and told him I needed to get to work because I have to be home by a certain time. He walked away and I began the job. He seemed very angry at this point and I didn't understand why. I thought about leaving because I was so uncomfortable about what just happened, but I was also too anxious to leave at the same time. I'm not sure why, but I stayed and finished the job. It took me about 2 hours to complete. It was really weird because through the whole time I was working, I would catch him staring at me here and there through multiple different windows, sometimes with this very creepy smile on his face, almost condescending in a way. In my head, I was thinking what the hell is wrong with this man? But I had already showed up, started the job, and I wanted my money. So I completed it like I said. When I was finished, I grabbed everything he let me borrow and put it on his front porch. I knocked on the door to let him know I was finished with the job. He handed me $120 and told me to get out of here in a very demanding and rude way. I stood there for a moment in shock and kind of just stared at him because I was confused. He began screaming at me and telling me to get the hell away and to get off his property. I didn't even care at that point that he didn't pay me the full $150. I was so scared that something bad was going to happen that I booked it to my car and went home. On my way to the car, he was sort of yelling at me saying he'll see me soon. That if I didn't want anything bad to happen, to not tell anyone what happened. He yelled my address at me. I cannot believe the words that came out of his mouth. How in the hell did he know my address? What does he want from me? I started crying on my way home, and I mean I was hysterical. I'd never been that scared in my life. I kept looking behind me to make sure he wasn't following. He wasn't, but that didn't really help how I was feeling. I was absolutely fucking terrified. When I got home, I rushed to my bedroom and tried my best to gather my thoughts. I was too scared to tell my parents what had happened. I was worried if I did, and I got him arrested, that when he got out of jail, that he would for sure try to kidnap me or something crazy like that. I lied awake all night that night. I didn't even attempt to sleep because I was so anxious. It wasn't until maybe around 1:30 a.m. that I heard a car outside and a car door shut kind of quietly. I peeked through my window and it was him. It was the same car that was at Bob's house. I was freaking the hell out, so I ran out of my room, into my parents' room, screaming, and I told them everything that was going on and that there was a man outside that was going to try and hurt me. My dad grabbed his pump shotgun and started screaming at him and threatening him. He took off, and I never seen him again after that. My parents called the police and got him arrested for harassment and attempted aggravated assault or something like that. This was over 3 years ago. But I still live in the same house, and still to this day, I have nightmares and anxiety about what happened. I don't even like staying at home alone anymore either. I hope I never see him again. I was selling my old couch on Craigslist because I had just got a new one and I didn't want my old one anymore. It wasn't in the best shape. It definitely lived its life and served its purpose. But I bought it for like $800 a few years back and expected it to be worth at the very least $250. I put it on Craigslist for $300, with the idea already in my head that I wouldn't take anything less than $200. I had some people reach out to me, but I'm sure you know that if you've ever sold something online before, people like to be flaky when it comes to buying stuff online. They will message you and seem interested and just ghost you. Anyways, I had people reach out to me, but no one serious until maybe just over a week after posting my ad on Craigslist. I received a call from a guy. He told me his name was Jim. He said he would like to come look at the couch and wanted to know if he could stop by later tonight when he gets off work. I told him that would not be a problem, so I gave him my address. Not even an hour after that, he showed up to my house. I heard a knock on my door, wondering who it was because Jim wasn't supposed to be here for another 3 hours or so. I looked through my peephole to see if I recognized who was knocking. I didn't recognize the man at all. "Hello? Who are you?" I asked him in a very weary tone. "Hi, it's Jim. I talked to you on Craigslist about the couch. I know I'm a bit early. I probably should have called. I'm sorry." I cracked my door open with a slight concern on my face. Okay, I said. I opened the door all the way and told him to come on in. He looked at the couch and asked if I would take $150 for it. I told him no, the lowest I could do is $200. He seemed a bit irritated by that, but the couch was worth more than $150. I mean, I'm sure if I waited long enough I could sell it to someone else for $250 to $300. He said okay and that he could do $200. He asked if he could use my bathroom real quick because he has a long drive home. I told him that I didn't mind and pointed him to the bathroom. Right then and there I had this weird feeling like something was wrong. I told myself I was just being anxious and ridiculous, so I tried not to think much of it. When he came back out of the bathroom, it was like his whole personality changed. I'm not exaggerating. He seemed like a whole new person. The face he was making, the way he was talking, and his tone of voice all changed. He said, "Look, you're gonna give me the goddamn couch for $150 or I'm gonna take it from you." Before he even had time to finish his sentence, 2 more guys came through my front door with knives in their hand and headed towards us by the couch. I started freaking out and begged them not to hurt me and that they can have the couch and I won't call the cops and to please leave. I told them I have a family and I don't want anyone getting hurt and that they can just have the couch. I must have repeated myself at least 10 times in a frantic cry. I was absolutely terrified. They took the couch and I never called the cops because I have a wife and 2 sons that I love deeply, and I worry about their safety more than anything. We were renting that house, so we decided to look for another place to live because of what happened. In the last 5 months of living there, I never seen them again, and hopefully I never have to. It was the summer of 2014. I was 15 years old. I was staying at my friend George's house for the night. This was a common occurrence, and I used to stay over there sometimes more than 2 to 3 times a week during the summer. After all, he was my best friend, and we were kids, so it was completely normal. George and his parents had lots of property behind their house. Probably like 7 to 8 acres, maybe more honestly. They had a huge barn, a cornfield, and some really cool trails in the woods we used to ride our dirt bikes and 4-wheelers in. I felt like a bad friend for this, but I didn't even know it was his birthday when I got there. After people started showing up, and like more of his friends and family, I realized that he did tell me that today was his birthday a few weeks back. Oh man, I thought. I didn't get him a present. I immediately apologized to him and he took it very well. As a matter of fact, he told me he didn't want any birthday presents from his friends this year and that he wasn't expecting anything because of how good his parents spoiled him this year. That made me feel better, but I still felt guilty. We did everything that you would normally do for a 15-year-old's birthday party. We had cake, opened presents, and us kids spent some time playing outside with his new airsoft guns that he got for his birthday. He already had quite the collection of them, so we all had our own that we could play with. I won't go too deep into this part, but we decided we wanted to do teams. It was me, George, and Will. The other team had Evan, Scott, John, and Kyle. They had more people, but we had better guns. The whole gist of the game was to shoot them before we get shot. So we were all running around the trails frantically, trying to get the other team down before they got us. After quite a few games, and skip forward 2 hours or so, it was around 6:30, so the sun was starting to set. George and I agreed we should all go back inside and play some video games before everyone had to leave. But everyone else wanted to keep playing with the airsoft guns outside. Even though it was George's birthday, he was nice enough to let everyone vote on what we should do. It was apparent that we were going to be playing outside longer according to the votes, so that's what we did. We restarted the game, and we all had about 2 minutes to get set up and hide where we wanted to. George yelled, 3, 2, 1, go. This time George and I were alone. We were pretty deep into the trails at this point, and he had me following him deeper into the woods. We ran all the way to this treehouse that was built a long time ago. We climbed up there immediately. Are you sure they will even come back this far? I asked George. I mean, it's getting dark, and I doubt they would even think that we would go this far. Yeah, they probably won't, he said, but if they do, they won't be able to get us before we get them, and plus it'll be funny if they can't find us. As time went on, it got darker. Hey George, we should probably go home. Just a few more minutes, he said. After all, it was his birthday, so I wanted to do what he wanted. Shh, do you hear that? George whispered. There was someone, or something walking quite close to us. We thought it was them, but we heard our friends yelling and talking further out into the distance, so we immediately ruled them out. Unless they were splitting up and trying to trick us, I whispered. No. No offense to them, but none of them are smart enough to think of that, George said. Geez, harsh, I said. He looked at me and kind of shrugged, and then he put his finger up to his mouth and said, shh. Whatever was approaching us was getting closer. After a few moments of being quiet, we could finally see the tall, slender-looking shadow that stood before us. I don't think they can see us, I whispered. Shh, George said. Yeah, it definitely wasn't any one of our friends because whatever it was the size of a fully grown man and not a teenager. We stayed put, as quiet as possible. Thankfully it was dark because from where the person was standing, it was evident they couldn't see us. The person started walking in the opposite direction now. The last bit of light that shined into the woods ever so lightly shined directly at the unknown person. They were wearing some sort of ghillie suit, it looked like. George took no chances and jumped down as soon as the strange figure was out of sight. What, are you crazy? I asked. He insisted I followed, so I did. I was scared, but I would have been more scared by myself, so that's why I went with him. We immediately ran a different way than the way we used to get there. He said he knew a better way back to the house, and that there was a way through the cornfield that was parallel to the trails we were in. Almost immediately after jumping out of the treehouse, though, the thing in what looked like a ghillie suit, who we assumed to be a weird man, heard us and started running towards us. We had a bit of distance between us and him, and it was a good thing we were way faster, because I don't know what would have happened to us or one of us had us not have been faster. We ran screaming the whole way back. Our friends must have realized that we weren't joking because they also started running towards us and made their way to us only a minute or two later. We all made it to my backyard, and my dad must have heard us because he ran out with no shoes on at all to our rescue. George and I told him everything. My dad immediately called the police, but there wasn't much they could do since they couldn't find the man, and since I couldn't give a description. The only thing I can really say is, I will never be going back out into those trails ever again, and I highly doubt George will either. This took place like 10 years ago. I was staying at Alex's house, who was my best friend at the time. It was just your average weekend of playing with Nerf guns, eating pizza, and drinking Mountain Dew while playing Call of Duty and Halo on Xbox Live all night. You know, pretty much what every kid did back in 2012. This is more of a mysterious kind of story, and I'm certain that most of the people I've told either think it's made up or that I'm crazy. But my friends and I know it's true. Ever since this night, I've 100% believed that there is such thing as the paranormal, or whatever you want to call it. But you know what I'm talking about. Like ghosts, demons, maybe not that exactly, but something bad and extremely disturbing. Something that we as humans can't comprehend yet. So we were upstairs in Alex's room, just me, him, and Sebastian. We were just having fun taking turns playing Halo and Call of Duty, since there were 3 of us and he only had 2 controllers. All of a sudden, Alex muted the TV and got us all to be quiet. Immediately, we all heard what sounded like someone screaming at the top of their lungs, like I have never heard before. It was a very demented, wailing sound that Alex said he hears sometimes. Keep in mind, it was 1 o'clock in the morning, on a dead-end street that only had 1 street light post on it. With a very small amount of light that we had to work with, we saw this silhouette of a super tall being sprinting like a deer across the street. The wailing sound diminished slowly as it got further away from us. "What the heck was that, Alex?" "It's a ghost," he said. "What do you mean a ghost?" "Come on, you saw that too. Now if you can sit here and lie to yourself and say that was a human or some sort of animal species that isn't known to man yet, then go ahead. But clearly that thing was no animal, and it definitely was not a human being. I don't know what it is. My guess is as good as yours." By this time, the strange skinwalker looking thing has completely vanished out of sight, and we couldn't hear anymore. Alex kept staring out the window though. He looked like he was about to go insane. "Alex, hey bud, you okay? You should probably sit down and drink some water." He then started to cry. I guess the emotions of all this got to him and he couldn't control it, so he started having a breakdown. Apparently this has been happening to him for years now, and he doesn't know what to do, and that no one else has seen it besides us three that he knows of, and that his parents won't believe him and that they think he's crazy. I think he was happy that after all these years someone else actually saw what he was talking about. Of course he didn't want us to see it because it traumatized us as well, but I think it gave him some sort of comfort knowing that it was real and he's not crazy. But maybe even more discomfort though, because knowing that it's real is downright terrifying. Apparently he still hears it from time to time, but he has chosen to completely ignore it. Nothing bad has happened yet, and we hope nothing bad ever happens at all. My parents were gone for the weekend, and so I decided to invite a friend over to stay the night. This was a couple years ago, and no, I wasn't supposed to have anyone over while my parents were gone, but it was probably a good thing that I did. We were playing board games and card games all night, just hanging out on our phones and enjoying each other's company, and just talking about the most random stuff you could imagine. I think I was 16. Yeah, I had just turned 16. My friend was a year older than me, so she was 17. We weren't dating, she was just like a girl best friend of mine, and her name was Hannah. I lived in a pretty nice house growing up, I'm not going to lie. My mom was a doctor, and my dad ran his own pretty successful pressure washing business. And I was an only child, so I was pretty spoiled, I guess you could say. I always wanted a brother or sister, but my parents couldn't have kids after me. They thought about adoption, but they never did. Anyways, it was like 9 o'clock when Hannah got there. My parents had already been gone for hours, so we were all set. My room was upstairs, and that's where we hung out for most of the time. When you walk out of my room, straight ahead are the stairs, parallel from my bedroom and my own personal bathroom across from the hallway. There was a huge overlook of windows that showed the whole entire backside of my house. I remember growing up, when I was really young, I always felt creeped out walking by it, especially at night when I was home alone. We had a pretty large backyard with a pond, a play set, and a nice barn. Behind all that were trees, and I mean woods that go back for probably 3 or more acres. So if someone really wanted to, they could be spying on us and we would never know. Of course my parents had cameras, but there were a lot of blind spots. The cameras were infrared, but you could only see the shape and maybe an estimate of the height of what it was capturing, but obviously no specific details at night when it was dark. Not from that distance anyways. I wanted to take a shower, so I did. Hannah hung out downstairs in the living room and waited. After only a few minutes of being in the shower, Hannah ran upstairs screaming my name. "Lucas, come here right now. There's someone outside in the backyard. Hurry. Hurry up, Lucas, I'm scared." I put my clothes on so fast and didn't even bother to dry off. I put my shoes on and I grabbed my rifle that was locked in my parents' safe in their bedroom. I closed all the blinds in the house and made sure all the windows and both doors were locked. We sat up in my bedroom with my rifle. She called the cops and I called my mom. The police were on their way. My parents were hours away, but they dropped what they were doing immediately and got here as fast as they could. I stayed on the phone with my mom the whole time, explaining what was going on. Then all of a sudden, it was the sound of a window shattering. Hannah screamed and ran into my closet. I was the one with the gun here, so I had to make sure we were safe. Even though I was terrified and my heart was beating out of my chest, I had to protect us. And in that moment, I knew what I had to do. I stepped out of my room, and at the top of the stairs, I yelled, "Hey, get out of here. The police are on their way, and I have a gun. If I see you at all, I'm going to shoot you." I heard loud banging underneath me, of which sounded like it came from the kitchen. I heard rustling throughout the whole house, as he was searching through each room individually. He tried to break into my parents' safe, but to no avail, thankfully. It probably would have been nothing less than a shootout had he been armed that night. He took some of my parents' valuables, like some expensive jewelry, and a few other small things. He tried to run away shortly after, but the police arrived as he was running out. The whole thing unfolded right in front of my eyes. One of the officers tased him and they put him in cuffs. Apparently he had a warrant for his arrest for a separate break-in and armed robbery case. My parents have never let me stay home alone since, and I don't ever want to stay home alone anyways. Not at that house, at least. Okay, this is 100% true, even though most people I tell this to in real life don't believe me. When I was really little, my parents would let me stay up late on the weekends and watch TV until I fell asleep. I really loved these times, and I would stay up later than anybody else just because I could. Well, one night I was almost asleep on the couch when I heard a noise on our front porch. It was the sound of our old-fashioned porch swing moving back and forth. I was a little scared, so I crept toward the bay windows of my living room and peeked out towards the porch. Sitting on my front porch swing was an older woman, probably in her 50s or so, wearing nothing but a nightgown, covered in blood and holding a huge kitchen knife. I flipped out immediately and ran screaming into my parents' room but was too terrified to form words. My parents saw that I was upset, but when I finally was able to tell them what I saw, my dad got really angry and told me it was just a dream and to go back to bed. I refused and kept crying and screaming until he had enough and snatched my arm and dragged me towards the front door to prove that nothing was there. I kicked and screamed all the way trying to make him stop, but he kept pulling me. Finally, we got to the door. He unlocked it, swung it open, and said, "See, there's nothing." To this day, I have never seen the look of fear and shock that was on his face when that woman turned and stared at both of us and slowly stood up with a knife. My dad slammed the door shut and got my mom to call the police while he went and got his gun. He went back to the door with a 12 gauge and cracked the door enough to stick the barrel out. He asked her what she was doing, and she said somebody killed my husband, but it wasn't me. My dad told her that the police were coming, and she freaked out, grabbed the knife, and walked away. The police found her 15 minutes later trying to break into one of our neighbors' houses. I never slept in the living room again. When I was younger, we frequently visited my grandparents around holidays, even though we didn't live in the same town. My aunt lived 2 houses down from my grandparents. The lady in the house between was creepy. She was a large woman, over 6 feet. She wore logging chains around her neck, a dress, and work boots. The only time I remember seeing her outside was either in her garden in the back or when she was washing the outside of her house. Scrubbing the actual building, she did this often. During these times, she would yell at us kids and call us all kinds of things. She would tell us the devil would be coming for us. The adults told us to leave her alone and to avoid her. We would run the distance between my aunts and my grandparents because when you passed by, she was watching out the windows. It was creepy and we never went alone. One Halloween, one of the cousins dared us to trick-or-treat at her house. I remember how scared I was, but I didn't want to be a chicken. Plus, I was going with the group. One of us rang the doorbell and there was a lot of banging noises in the house, suddenly like doors slamming. When she answered the door, she had a severed head in her hands and we all went screaming. The adults told us it was a Halloween prop and we knew we shouldn't be bothering her and deserved to be scared. About a month later, my parents got a phone call that the lady tried to kill my aunt while she was bringing in groceries and had my young cousin in her arms. The lady had one of them rope saws and had come up behind my aunt with it. She put it over her head and around her neck and proceeded to saw. My aunt naturally flipped and started kicking the door. My uncle came and beat the lady down with a fire poker. The police investigation revealed that the woman had been digging tunnels under her home which were coming up under my aunt's, my grandparents', and another neighbor's house. She had been bringing the dirt up and putting it in the raised beds of the gardens. She also had a shrine of some sort underground which had a few severed heads around it. My aunt survived, by the way, but has a long scar across her neck. So my mom remarried about 2 years ago. My dad died when I was 12, so she had been widowed for over 10 years. This new relationship was very whirlwind with them meeting, dating, and getting married within 3 months. I didn't know much about the guy, but my mom was happy, so I just tried to be supportive. She moved into his house in upstate Virginia and invited my fiance and I to spend a weekend in her new home getting to know her new husband. My mom's new home was pretty isolated. It sat on a few hundred acres of lovely rolling hills and was very picturesque. I was nervous about getting to know this guy, but really trying to make the most of it. Over the course of our first day there, though, I felt more and more uneasy. I didn't think it was weird, just silly. My mom's new husband was being very welcoming and friendly. We were being made to feel very at home, yet I still couldn't shake this oppressive feeling. I finally chalked it up to me being more upset about my mom getting remarried than I was willing to admit to myself. We spent most of the day wandering around outside since I felt worse when indoors. That night, my fiancé and I showered together. When I turned my back to him, he stopped talking mid-sentence and asked, "What did you do to your back?" "Well, nothing. Why?" "You have a large bruise." I hopped out to try and see it in the mirror. I got back in when we finished showering in silence. Then it was off to bed. The one window in our room looked out over a pitch-black empty field, but I couldn't sleep until I hung something over the window. I felt sure that otherwise someone would watch us through the window. The next morning I had a complete meltdown. I woke up and just couldn't stop crying. I told my fiancé we had to leave. He tried to calm me down by telling me all the things I had been telling myself. My feelings of anxiety were just a result of seeing my mom with someone new. The longer I spent with them, the easier it would become, but I just had to leave. It was only Saturday morning and we were supposed to stay until Monday, but I felt completely hysterical. I knew I was on the verge of a panic attack and my only concrete thought was that I had to stop crying long enough to make our excuses and get the hell out. We did. As soon as we were on the road, it felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I was even feeling embarrassed for my behavior, hoping I didn't insult my mom's husband by leaving early. Then my fiancé broke the silence. "That bruise on your back. Did you get a good look at it?" I had. It looked like someone had touched the middle of your back with fingers spread wide, with their hand at a tilt. I want to make completely clear, no one had touched my back the previous day, especially hard enough to bruise me. Cut to 3 weeks later, my mom comes to visit me. The entire time she's hounding me to come stay with her again. After finally trying to change the subject for the 5th time, I level with her. Before I even finish telling the story, her face is white as a sheet. She tells me she has been feeling the same way in the house. She hates it. She wants them to move as soon as possible. And the real kicker? Her new husband's previous wife shot and killed herself right outside in the same field our room window overlooked. It was a cold and snowy Christmas Eve. We were leaving my grandma's house. When I say we, I'm talking about me and my little brother Ricky. On our way home, the winter storm picked up heavily. The roads were already terrible and it was dark, so I was understandably a bit worried. Especially because I was a new driver, and this was my first year driving in the winter. And I had my little brother in the car with me, who I was responsible for. My grandparents live in the country kind of, so we had miles upon miles of driving before we got into the downtown area of the city of which they live. I relied on a GPS on my phone to get us to my grandparents' house, because it's an hour away and I don't go there often at all. This year is my first time there in like 7 or 8 years, so of course I had to rely on my GPS to get us home. There were way too many turns that I wasn't paying attention to on my way there to even come close to remembering my way home. The problem was, my phone died after 10 minutes of driving or so I couldn't call anybody, and my little brother didn't even have a phone yet. We thought about turning back around and going to my grandparents', but we didn't really consider it for long. We probably should have, but I chose not to, because we were never really that close with this part of the family, so I thought it would be awkward. Luckily, I found my way back to the town they lived in. I was thinking, okay, maybe I can buy a phone charger at a gas station, or like, maybe I could use someone's phone. But all the stores were closed. Even the 3 gas stations we found were closed. We were down on our luck. We found a hotel though, and it was actually open. Thank God, I thought to myself. They will definitely have a phone I can use. There was like nobody there besides one worker at the front desk. When I walked in, I literally did not see one single car in the parking lot. I explained to this guy our situation. I asked if we could borrow a phone. He said sure, and that it wouldn't be a problem at all. "Good luck getting any service," he said. He had a very weird and ominous tone to his voice when he said that. Okay, I said. This guy seemed weird, I thought to myself. I dialed my mom's phone number, but it just made a constant beeping noise, which meant no service. Ugh. I must have tried like 10 times, but to no avail. We had been trying to figure something out for hours now, and we were getting tired, so I decided to finally give in. I told my little brother we would have to sleep here for the night and that we will leave first thing in the morning. I felt horrible because I knew my parents had to be worried sick about us. And I forgot to mention, this place was, to say the least, wretched. I mean, it looked pretty run down before we even walked in, so I wasn't expecting anything fancy, but geez, this room that we got was legit so disgusting. I didn't even feel comfortable sleeping on the bed because the sheets smelled horrible. I was just so tired though, so I couldn't help but fall asleep. I don't know what woke me up. I wake up a lot in my sleep every night and I don't know why. But oh my gosh, I'm so happy I woke up, because if I had stayed asleep for even a second longer, who knows what could have happened to my brother. When I woke up, I realized my brother wasn't there. My heart was beating so fast, I was confused. I immediately stormed up and looked around our room. He was nowhere to be found. I ran outside of our room and ran a few hallway lengths down some stairs to the front desk. Hey, have you seen my brother? He's gone, I can't find him. He looked at me in shock. No I haven't, he said. What? How is this possible? I thought to myself. I ran outside only wearing shorts and a t-shirt and some slippers. And I shit you not, there was someone dressed in all black that was holding my brother's hand trying to lure him in his car. Hey, you piece of shit, let him go. He took off running with him. Luckily I caught up with him. I have never ran that fast in my life. I hit him in the back of the head as hard as I could and he fell straight to the ground while I slipped and fell on some ice. The guy ran off and I got my brother back and took him inside. I calmed him down and told him everything was going to be okay. Turns out Ricky couldn't sleep, and he took my wallet to go get something to snack on from the vending machine and got lured out by some strange man. I don't know what was going on or how they thought they were going to get away with that, or whatever even happened. I'm just glad he's okay. We were able to get service a few hours later and called the authorities. Got a hold of my mom and she helped us get home. The police don't really have anything on the strange man. They think he was in a stolen car. The only info I could give is that he was tall, maybe 6'2", and fairly skinny. He had a shaved head and he was in his mid-50s or so. My brother and I have been traumatized by this. I feel so bad for him. He is only a kid. And something that haunts me to this day is that he's still probably out there doing this to other kids. I was on a road trip heading to my cousin's house. He lives almost on the complete other side of the US as me. He lives in El Paso, Texas, and I was coming from the northern part of Michigan, which for anyone that knows, that is obviously an extremely long drive. The driving is honestly a little too much for me, but I've been doing this once a year every summer for the past 4 years, so I guess you could say I'm a little used to it by now. Still though, it's almost impossible to get fully used to driving that far at once. I mean, obviously I take breaks here and there, but that is a lot of driving. You start getting cranky and a bit sore from sitting in the same position so long. Anyways, it's no big deal because I love going to my cousin's, so it's all totally worth it for me. I was getting sleepy on the first night driving. I'd been driving for around 9 hours, with only a stop or two at a gas station for snacks and a pee break. Like I said, it was getting to be around that time where I should probably head to sleep before I start getting delirious behind the wheel. The nearest motel was like 30 minutes away that I knew of, so I decided to stop there. When I got there, it felt a little eerie. It could be just because I'm unfamiliar with the area, or that it was nighttime and the motel looked like it was a bit run down. But I didn't want to sleep in my car at a rest station, so this was my next best option. The area was relatively remote. I'm pretty sure there was a town only a few miles down the road, but it definitely had that like old town, middle of nowhere look and feel to it, if you get what I mean. I don't really mean that in a bad way either. I thought it was quite peaceful actually. Even though it was run down, it felt like luxury to be able to sleep in a bed. As soon as I got in my room, I was happy because I could finally relax for the night. I did some stretching, ate some snacks, and then I turned on the TV. I started dozing off shortly after. I'm not sure how long I was sleeping, but I heard a couple of loud bangs on my window. Hey man, help. I need help. Let me in please, it's an emergency, help. What the hell is going on? I thought to myself. I woke up in a panic. I almost opened the door for him, but I decided not to. I just had a really bad feeling, like this gut-wrenching feeling that something was off. I told him to go to the front office or to seek someone else for help because I was in a deep sleep and that he scared the living hell out of me. He said, and I quote, "Whatever, man, screw you then." He walked off only a few moments later. As I was sitting there in disbelief trying to process my thoughts, 30 minutes must have gone by. I was trembling in anxiety because of what just happened, and I didn't want to fall back asleep in case he decided to come back. Well, not sure if I manifested it, but he came back. This time a lot more angry. He then started to try and open the door by using the door handle. He actually ended up breaking through by picking the lock somehow. "Dude, what the hell do you want from me?" "Just give me your wallet and everything will be fine." He had a gun that he pulled out as soon as he walked in, pointed at me and said, "I'm not going to ask you again." I immediately gave him my wallet, phone, and keys. He took off with the car and everything, and did Lord only knows what else. When he took off, you could hear the tire marks burning rubber as he sped away. I immediately ran to the front desk to tell them everything that just happened. We called the police, and when they showed up 30 minutes later, there obviously wasn't much they could do. It wasn't until maybe 2 days later they found my car totaled about an hour and 30 minutes away. Luckily, I only had $150 in my wallet, and I canceled all my cards before he could max all my credit cards out. This was by far the craziest thing that has ever happened to me. I was so shook that I decided to skip going to my cousin's that year. My fiance actually called off work for a day to drive and come get me. I haven't heard much of the situation since. This might sound a little weird, and maybe it is, but on my 19th birthday, my friends threw a small party for me at this really run-down motel that was in a really rough part of town. We went to this motel specifically because we knew that it would be cheaper, and we figured we would be able to get away with a lot more here than your average hotel or motel. None of my friends had their own place yet, so that's why we decided to party here. No parents meant no rules. We were all getting high, smoking weed, and drinking. I was having a great time. Originally, it was only supposed to be 6 of us, but as time went on, more and more people kept coming. Some people I didn't even know even. By 11:30, there was like 15 of us all smashed together in this small room. I told everyone to stop inviting people or I would call the party off. Well, as time went on, more people showed up. We ended up getting a noise complaint, and one of the managers told me and 2 of my other friends that we had to make everyone leave or they were going to be kicking us all out. So we made everyone leave. It was just me and 2 of my other friends at this point. Honestly, I much preferred it this way anyways. It was way too crowded to be in there with all those people. By 1 o'clock, we were all pretty messed up and we thought it would be fun to go walk around outside. John was the only one that seemed like he didn't want to, but we convinced him to come and that it would be fun. He said it wasn't smart because of how bad of an area we were in. We told him to stop overthinking and that everything would be fine. Everything wasn't going to be fine though. It was at first, but then it all went wrong. You see, we were having a blast just walking around and listening to music with our speaker pretty loud. We were on a main road in Detroit, and it was a Saturday night, so there were lots of people around. I guess we made a wrong turn into a neighborhood because our fun stopped abruptly when we ran into a group of 8 or 9 plus guys who honestly looked like they were up to no good. I knew something bad was about to happen by the way they were walking over to us and by their tone of voice. They didn't even really say much to us though, and I'm sorry for getting graphic here, but they pretty much beat the crap out of us and took all of our phones, money, and even our liquor. One guy took my watch that my parents got me for my birthday last year as well. When they finally stopped beating us and took off, John and I soon realized that my friend Tommy literally got knocked out cold. We had no way of calling the police, so our only option was to carry Tommy home. I don't know why we were so dumb and naive and thought nothing could happen to us. The whole situation was one big mistake and easily the dumbest thing I've ever done in my life. I regret everything about that night. Tommy ended up coming to shortly after picking him up. Tommy and I both suffered from severe concussions, while John had a cracked rib. We ended up making a police report, but there wasn't much we could do other than wait and see if the cops could come up with anything. They never did. It was another quiet, average evening in the summer, in the middle of nowhere in a small city in Michigan. I was home alone for the night at my parents' house dog sitting while they were out of town. I moved out of my parents' house last year when I was 19 and moved into an apartment with 2 of my friends. I don't mind having them as roommates, but really it was nice to have the house to myself for once. This story I'm about to tell you is something that haunts me to this day. I don't think I could ever stay the night at my parents' house again, let alone by myself. Like I said, it was a quiet evening in your average small town in the US. My parents live on an old dirt road. They don't live in a neighborhood. It was more of a rural area. Each of their neighbors were at least a minute or two walk down the road. It wasn't the middle of nowhere exactly, but you get the picture. When my parents took off for the day, I stayed home all day eating snacks, watching movies, and playing video games. Everything was great, and nothing out of the ordinary happens until a bit later into the night, maybe around 10 o'clock-ish or so. Suddenly I heard this weird thud sound. I wasn't sure where it came from. It couldn't have been from inside because Sadie, my parents' dog, and I were the only ones in the house. I played it off as I told myself I am just overthinking and that it was nothing. Until maybe 20 minutes later I heard it again, except this time it was a lot louder. Somebody was knocking on the front window next to where I was sitting in the living room. Keep in mind, I couldn't see anything because it was pitch black outside and I didn't have any outside light that would let me see much of anything at all out there. The only thing I saw was a very faint shadow of what I assumed to be a person. I started freaking the hell out and ran and locked myself into my parents' room and hid in their walk-in closet behind some clothes. Who the hell could be knocking on my parents' window right now? Do they know I'm alone? What do they want? All these thoughts were running in my head. I must have sat in there for 45 minutes. I hadn't heard any other weird noises since, so I finally found the courage to go back out into the living room and investigate a bit more. I chalked it up to be that it was just probably some dumb teenagers ding-dong ditching me or something. I used to do that all the time when I was younger, so I just let it go. I decided to make myself some pizza, and I turned a movie on in the living room. I got through the first one and decided to put another movie on. I started dozing off halfway through the second movie, and all of a sudden, an extremely loud thud and aggressive sounding knock was coming from the door, and someone was messing with the door handle trying to get it open. I woke up in a panic. I sat up quick and ran back to my parents' room. I must have called my mom 5 times in a row, but of course, no answer. My only choice was to call 911. The cops showed up in less than 10 minutes. They finally caught the guy red-handed. He was wearing a mask and had a Bowie knife along with handcuffs with him. Had the cops not shown up in time, who knows what could have happened to me. The man got arrested and apparently he was a wanted fugitive on the run for murder. I'm sure he will be in prison for a very long time. My guess was he thought that there was no one home and was going to rob the place. You can never be too sure though. I'm glad I never had to find out. I really love thunderstorms. It was pouring rain all night with lightning and thunder here and there. I was home alone with my cats, living my best life. This is what I would describe as my happy place. It was a Saturday night which meant no work or school tomorrow. I wish every day was like this. Maybe then again, I don't. Not like this night in particular anyways. Everything was great until it wasn't. I remember the last peaceful moment I had that night. I was sitting there in my bed playing Super Mario Bros. 3 on my Nintendo DS. When I'm bored and can't sleep, my DS is usually my go-to. A lot of nights I play it until I doze off. I live alone. I don't have a girlfriend or any roommates either. I have like one good friend that comes over every once in a blue moon, but we don't do much. We just chat here at the house for a few until he leaves. You could say I'm a homebody, I guess. This one particular night, the strangest thing happened to me. I've told some of my friends, but no one really seems to believe me or take me seriously. I'm not sure what to make of it even to this day, and it drives me insane to think about. I was getting ready for bed, so I turned my DS off and I must have been asleep with only a minute or two afterwards because I was so exhausted. It wasn't until a few hours of sleeping peacefully that I awoke to multiple loud noises in the house, like footsteps and yelling and things being ripped through and thrown all around the house. I woke in a dreamlike state and it took me at least 30 seconds to fully realize what was happening. When I came to and realized that there were people in my house, I panicked. I was so scared I just didn't know what to do. My bedroom is upstairs and I could tell that the noises were from downstairs. I knew my brain wasn't just imagining things, so I crawled out my window, hung with my hands for a brief moment from the window until I built up the courage to let go. I said a little prayer, and that's all I needed. I let go and made it to the ground thankfully without hurting myself. I ran as fast as I could to the closest house nearby and called the police. By the time they showed up, the intruders were gone. They took some belongings of mine and left my house a disaster. I've never seen or heard from them again after this. I plan on moving as soon as possible because I'm terrified they will come back. I'm not sure if the cops will ever find who did this, unfortunately. I'm losing hope. It's already been 8 months, and I've heard nothing from the police. I barely even sleep at my place anymore. I usually stay at my parents' or a friend's. I'll be moving out as soon as possible. I just can't take being there alone, especially at night. It also made me realize that anything can happen at any time, anywhere. So for that reason, I took some classes and bought a handgun, so that way I can carry it with me legally. Anyone who does this sort of thing, I hope you rot in hell. I don't really like talking about this story much, but here we go. So this took place around 5 years ago. I was 18 years old at the time, and I was home alone for the night. I didn't think much of it really. I had the house to myself quite often actually. I liked it this way. My little brothers weren't running around being annoying, and my parents didn't bother me with the bedtime. A few of my friends and I were playing Call of Duty on Xbox 360. It was really just another ordinary night until I heard the doorbell ring. It was like 12:30 a.m., so that was super unusual, and immediately I sought that out as a red flag. I could feel the hair standing up on my neck as I approached the front door. I turned the porch light on and turned my living room light off at the same time as I was peeking out the front door to see if I could get a better look. Of course, there was no one there. I texted a few of my friends to see if they were messing with me, but they swore they weren't. I really didn't believe them, because who would be trying something as malicious as what the worst fears that I was anxious about in my head were? I live in a safe neighborhood, and in general a nice city, so I just played it off as my buddies messing with me. I went back to playing Call of Duty and forgot about what happened for a few minutes, until I heard the doorbell again, except this time they rung it at least 5 times and pounded on the door as well. I immediately dashed to the front door, opened it, and yelled, "Alright, enough is enough. Seriously, leave me alone or I'm going to call the cops." But it was quiet, almost too quiet. I walked down my porch to further investigate around the house to see if I could find anyone. As soon as I made the turn around the left side of my house, there was someone dressed in all black in a weird old man mask. We made direct eye contact. "Do it then," they said. "Do what?" "Call the cops, I dare you," the masked unknown person said. "Noah, stop messing with me, seriously. You about gave me a heart attack." I quickly realized it wasn't my friend Noah. He wouldn't continue messing with me like this after he knew how scared I was and run at me with a fucking knife. I booked it inside. I didn't even look behind me once. I locked the door and made sure all the other doors and windows were locked as well as fast as possible. I called Noah to see if it was him. He swore to me it wasn't and that I needed to get off the phone with him now and call the police immediately. I believed him. So that's what I did. I called the police. They showed up within only 5 minutes or so, and I told them everything I knew. They never found who it was. Still, to this day, I don't think it was my friend, but I wonder what the hell did that guy want from me if it wasn't my friend? I think my friend might have felt too bad for me to admit that it was him. I don't know what to make of it, or maybe that's my way of dealing with this, but I don't know. Maybe I'm in denial. I don't know. Either way, that was the scariest thing that ever happened to me. Maybe I need better friends. Every night, no matter the weather, something walks down our street whistling softly. You can only hear it if you're in the living room or the kitchen when they walk by, and it always starts at exactly 3:03. The sound starts faint, somewhere near the beginning of the lane where the Carson's place is. We're towards the middle of the street, so the whistling moves past us before fading away in the direction of the cul-de-sac. When I was younger, my sister and I would sneak into the kitchen some nights to listen. Mom and Dad didn't like that, and we'd catch hell if they found us out there. But they were never too hard on us since we always stuck to the big rule. The one rule we had was don't ever try to look at whatever was whistling. My neighborhood is a funny place. I've lived here since I was 6 and I love it. The houses are small but well kept, good sized yards. Plenty of places to roam. There are a lot of kids here my age. I turned 13 back in October. We grew up together and would always play foursquare in the cul-de-sac or roam around from back porch to back porch in the summer. This was a good place to grow up. I'm old enough to see it, and there's only the 2 strange things here. The night whistling and the good luck. The whistling never bothered me much. Like I said, I couldn't even hear it from my bedroom, but my mom and dad don't like talking about it, so I've stopped asking questions. My dad is a strong guy, tall and calm. He has an accent since he moved to the US as a kid. His family, my grandparents, They're from the islands. That's what they call it. My dad, the only time he isn't so calm is if the whistler comes up. He talks a little quicker then, eyes move faster, and he tells us not to think about it so much and to always remember the one rule. The one big rule. Don't try to look outside when the whistler goes past. Not that we could look even if we wanted. See, there are shutters on the inside of every window. Thick pieces of heavy canvas that pull down from the top and latch to the bottom of the window frame. Each latch even has a small lock, about the size of what you'd find in a diary. My dad locks these shutters every night before we all go to bed and keeps the key in his room. My mom? I don't know what she thinks about the whistling. I've seen her out in the living room before at 3:03 when the sound starts. I could see her if I cracked my door open just an inch to peek. She's not out there often. At least I haven't caught her much, but once or twice a month I think she sits out there on her big red couch just listening. The whistler has the same tune every night. It's cheerful, but also eerie at the same time. Remember how I said there are two odd things about where I live? Well, besides our night whistler, everyone in my neighborhood is really lucky. It's hard to explain and my dad doesn't like us talking about this part much either. But good things just seem to happen to people around here a lot. Usually it's small things, winning a radio contest or getting an unexpected promotion at work, or finding some arrowheads buried in the yard. You know, the authentic kind. The weather is pretty good and there's no crime. Everybody's gardens bloom extra bright in the fall. A million little blessings. I've heard my mom say about living here. But the main reason we stay here, why we moved here in the first place, is my sister Nola. She was born very sick, something with her lungs. We couldn't even bring her home when she was born, only visit her in the hospital. She was so small, I remember. Small even compared to the other babies. A machine had to breathe for her. We moved into her house here to be closer to the hospital. As soon as we moved here, Nola started getting better. The doctors couldn't figure it out. They chalked it up to whatever they were doing, but we all could tell. They were so confused. My parents knew. Even I knew. Nola getting better was just another of the million little blessings we got for living in our neighborhood. So that's why we stayed, even after we found out that for every small miracle that happens here every day, now and then, some bad things happen. But they only happen if you look for the whistler. See, our neighborhood has a welcoming committee. They show up with macaroni casserole and a gift basket and a manila folder whenever someone new moves in. They're very friendly. 4 people showed up when we moved in 7 years ago. The committee made small talk and gave me a Snickers bar, and took turns holding Nola. It was her first week out of the hospital, so they were extra careful. Then the committee asked to speak to my parents in private, so I was sent to my room where I still managed to hear nearly every word. The welcoming committee told my parents about how nice the neighborhood was, really exceptionally, hard to explain kind of nice. And then they told my parents about the even harder to explain whistling that happened every morning at 3:03 and ended at the tick of 3:05. The group, our new neighbors, warned my parents that the whistling was quiet, would never harm or hurt us as long as we didn't look for what was making the sound. This part they stressed, and I pushed my ear into the door straining to hear them. People who went looking for the whistler had their luck change, sometimes tragically. A black cloud would hang over anyone that looked. Anything that could go wrong would. The manila envelope the committee brought over contained newspaper clippings, stories about car crashes and ruined lives, public deaths and freak accidents. Not everyone dies. I heard the head of the committee tell my dad, but the life goes out of them. Even if they live, there's no light in them ever again. No presence. My mom? I could tell she wasn't taking it seriously. She kept asking if this was some prank they planned new neighbors. At one point my mom got angry, accused the committee of trying to scare us out of the new home. She even asked them if they were racist on account of my dad being from the islands. My dad calmed her down, told her he could tell our new neighbors were sincere and they were just trying to help us. He explained that he grew up hearing these kinds of stories from his mom and that he knew there were strange things that walked among us. Some of those strange things were good and some of them were bad, but most were just different. After the committee left, Dad went out to the hardware store, bought the canvas blinds, the latches, and the locks, and installed them on every window in the house after dinner. That first night in our new house, I crept out of my room at 3 a.m., only to find my dad sitting on the living room couch, holding my baby sister. My dad held up his finger in a shh motion, but patted the couch next to him. I sat and we waited. At exactly 3:03, we heard the whistling. It came and it went, just like our neighbors said. The whistling returns each night, and we never look, and we enjoy our million little blessings each day. Nola breathes on her own, and she's grown into a strong, clever girl. My dad even joined the welcoming committee. We don't get new neighbors often. Why would anyone want to leave? But when a new family moves in, my dad and the committee bring the macaroni casserole, a gift basket, and the manila folder. I can always tell by the look on my dad's face when he comes back if the family took the committee seriously or if we'd be getting new neighbors again very soon. Not long ago, a family moved in directly next to us. The previous owner, Miss Maddie, passed away at the age of 105. She'd lived a good life, a long life. Our new neighbors seemed like they'd fit in just fine. They believed in the welcoming committee, took my dad's advice about the locking shutters since they had a young child of their own. Whatever newspaper clippings were in that manila envelope, whatever evidence, my dad never let us see. But I imagine it must have been awfully convincing since our neighbors got along with no issues for the first month. One night, when our new neighbors had to leave town, they sent their son, Holden, to stay with us. He was 12, a year under me in school. I didn't know him well before that night, but as soon as his parents dropped him off after dinner, I could tell it was going to be a bad time. "Do you know who was always out there whistling every night?" Holden asked the moment the adults left the room. The three of us were sitting in the den, some Disney movie playing idly on the television. My sister and I exchanged a glance. "We don't talk about that," I said. "I think it's that weirdo that lives in the big yellow house on the corner," Holden said. "Mr. Tolles?" my sister asked. "No way, he's really nice." Holden shrugged. Must be a psycho killer then." Nola tensed. "We don't talk about it," I repeated. "Let's go in my room and play Nintendo." We spent the next few hours playing video games, eating popcorn, and then watching movies. A typical sleepover, but I could see Holden was getting antsy. After my parents had wished us a good night, locked the blinds, and gone to bed, Holden stood up from his beanbag and walked over to where Nola and I were sitting on my bed. "Have you ever even tried looking?" he asked. "It's nearly time." Like most sleepovers, we conveniently ignored any suggestion of a bedtime. I was shocked to see he was right. It was almost 3 a.m. I sighed. "We don't... See, I can't even try to look because my dad locks the blinds every night and hides the key." He continued ignoring me. "So does our dad," said Nola. "No," replied Holden. "No, he doesn't." "You saw him do it," I said, a little sharper than I meant to sound. Holden grinned. "Your dad locks the blinds, yeah, but he doesn't hide the key. He keeps it right on his normal keychain." "So?" I asked, worried I already knew what he would say next, because I had noticed that my dad didn't bother hiding the key anymore after all these years, because he knew we took it seriously. "So, after your dad locked up but before your parents went to bed, I went to the bathroom, and on my way, I may have peeked into the room, and I may have seen your dad's keychain on his nightstand, and I maybe went and borrowed the key to the blinds." Nola and I stared, and his grin only grew wider. "You're lying," I said. Holden shrugged. "You can check if you want. Just open your parents' door and look. You'll see his keychain right there on the nightstand." "Stay here," I told both of them. "Don't move a muscle." I hurried over to my parents' room, but hesitated at the door. If Holden wasn't lying, my dad would be angry, beyond angry. I was scared thinking about it, but more scared of an open window with a whistler right outside. I opened the door, barely an inch, and looked in, but it was too dark to see. Taking a deep breath, I walked into the room. 2 steps into the dark, I froze. The whistling started, and I could hear it clearly from my parents' room. I never realized, but they must have heard the sound every single night since we moved into the house. They never told us. I don't think I could have slept through it. I stood there, listening to the whistling come closer, unsure whether I should turn on a light or call out for my dad. Soft sounds from the living room brought me back to reality. "Nola," I yelled, running out of my parents' rooms. Holden and Nola were standing near the front door next to a window. Holden wasn't lying. I could see him fumbling with the lock on one of the blinds. I heard a click. He did have the key. Holden let out a quick laugh. Nola stood next to him, hunched up, afraid, but maybe curious. The whistling was right outside our house now. I think I made a sound. I can't remember. Time felt frozen. Clock hands nailed to the face, but I found myself moving. I'm not fast. I've never been athletic. Somehow, though, I covered the space between myself and Nola in a moment. My eyes were locked on her, but I heard Holden pull the blind all the way down so it could release. I heard the snap of it start to raise, and I heard the whistling just on the other side of the window. But I had my arms around Nola, and I turned us so she was facing away from the window. At the same time, I jammed my eyes shut. The blind whipped open. The whistling stopped. I felt Nola shaking in my arms. "Don't look, okay?" I told her. "Don't turn around." We were positioned so that she was facing back towards the hallway and I was facing towards the window. My eyes were still closed. I felt her nod into my shoulder. I reached out with the arm not holding Nola and tried to touch Holden. My hand brushed against his arm. He was shaking worse than Nola. "Holden?" I asked. I reached past him and gingerly felt for the window. Eyes still sealed shut. The glass was cold against my fingertips, colder than it should have been for that time of year. I moved my hand up the window, searching for the string to the blind. The glass began to get warmer the further I reached, and there was a gentle hum feeding back into my fingertips. I tried not to think about what might be on the other side of the window. Finally, I touched the string and yanked the blinds shut. I opened my eyes. In the dim light leaking out from the kitchen, I could make out Holden, pale and small, staring at the now closed window. "Holden?" I asked again. He turned towards me and screamed. Everything became a flurry of motion. Lights sparked to life in the hall and the living room. My parents' footsteps thudded across the hardwood floor. I didn't turn back to look at them. My eyes were glued to Holden. He was pale, had bit his lip so hard there was a thin red line of blood running down his chin, and he'd wet himself. "What happened?" my dad asked from behind me. I managed to swivel away from Holden and look back. He looked. I'd never seen my dad so scared before, but I saw it that night, in that moment, an old, ugly terror stitched on his face, a parent's worst fear. "Just Holden?" he mouthed to me. I nodded yes. My dad let out a breath. He looked so relieved I nearly expected him to cheer. But then he turned to Holden and my dad's face changed. I wondered if he felt bad for feeling good that Holden was the only one that looked. There was a knock at the door. We all froze. Holden whimpered. "Don't answer it," my mom said. She stood at the threshold of the hall. I'd always thought she was a skeptic and just humored my dad about the windows and the whistler, but that night we were all believers. I noticed that both of my parents held baseball bats they must have taken from their bedroom. The knock came again, a little louder this time. "Please don't open the door," Holden whispered. My dad walked over to him, hugged him close. "We won't," my dad promised, still holding his bat. "Nothing is coming in here tonight." This time, the knocking was loud enough to rattle the door. Holden screamed again, and Nola clutched her arms around my neck. My mom came over and knelt down next to us, wrapping my sister and me close. "Call the police," my mom whispered to my dad. The knocking instantly stopped. My dad looked over his shoulder at us. "Do you think—" He was cut off by frantic knocking that trailed off to a polite tap sound. "Police," something said from the other side of the door. The voice from the outside sounded exactly like my mom, like a parrot repeating the words back to her. My mom pulled us closer. "Police." "Please stop," I heard her whisper. "I don't think calling them will help," my dad said. "How will we know when they're the ones at the door?" The knocking came back harder than before. The door shook, then it stopped. After a long moment, I heard the knocking again, but it was coming from our back door. We all turned together towards the back door, but the knocking immediately returned to the front door. Front to back, back to front. Loud then quiet, then loud again. Suddenly, the sound was coming from both doors at once. Big, heavy blows like a sledgehammer. Then something started rapping against all of the windows in the house, then the walls. It was like we were living inside a drum with a dozen people trying to play at once. Or like we were a turtle and something was attempting to claw us out of our shell. "Stop!" Holden yelled. The knocking died. "I won't tell," Holden said, staring at the door. "I promise I won't tell anyone what I saw. Just please go away." We waited for nearly a minute. Then we heard it. A soft tap coming from the window Holden had looked through earlier. Holden started to cry, sobbing like a prisoner watching gallows being built outside their cell. My dad held him, brushed his hair, but never lied to him, never told him things would be okay. The tapping at the window went on for the rest of the night. We huddled together in the living room for I don't even know how long. Eventually my mom tried to take us kids into my room while my dad stayed to watch the door. But the second we moved into my bedroom, the knocking came back. It was so loud that it was impossible to ignore. I was afraid the door couldn't take it. We went back to the living room and the knocking stopped. Only the tap on the window remained. None of us slept that night. The tapping stopped around 7 in the morning. That's about the time the sun comes up here. We waited another 2 hours before my dad opened the blinds from one window. He made us all go back to my parents' bedroom first. I heard him open the door and then come back in. Okay, he told us. It's done. Holden's parents came back around lunchtime. My mom and dad walked Holden over to his house and they all went inside for quite a while. Nola and I had watched from the window. She stuck to me the whole day, right at my side, sometimes holding my hand. When my parents came back, they looked grim but wouldn't tell us what they had said to Holden's family. It was a Sunday, so we all spent the day together, ordered pizza and watched movies. That night, everyone slept in my room. Nola and my mom in the bed with me, and my dad in the chair he'd pulled over. There was no knocking that night or any night since. We didn't see much of Holden or his parents for the rest of that week, but by Thursday there was a moving truck in their driveway. Nola and I watched them packing up the whole afternoon after school. What sticks with me the most is how tired Holden and his parents looked. All three had the same pallor, grim mouths, and lightless eyes. Even from across the street I could tell something was very wrong. Holden and his family were gone before sunset. I remember what the original welcoming committee said to my parents when we moved in. Not everyone who looks at the Whistler dies, but even those that live have the light go out of them and the rest of their lives are full of misfortune. A million little tragedies. I think Holden's parents must have looked, either to comfort him if they didn't believe or share the burden if they did. I watched Nola some days, happy and young and alive, and I wonder if I'd been slower, if she'd look out the window that night, would I have looked too, to comfort her, to share the burden? I'm glad I don't have to find out though. We still live in that house, in that neighborhood. We still hear our Whistler walking past every night. The blessings, the luck, the good things here are too good to leave, but we're careful. We don't have friends come over to spend the night anymore, and my dad hides the key to the blinds very, very well. Not that I've gone looking. Some things you just don't need to look for. I matched with this one guy named Steve on Tinder. I wasn't looking for anything serious or a hookup or anything of that nature. Maybe friends, I guess. I don't know, I was just bored. That was really it. I thought he seemed cool because we had similar interests in music, style, clothes, and etc. I started talking to him, and only after a few hours, he got my Snapchat and started messaging me there. He started asking if I wanted to hang out later that night. I didn't reply for maybe 30 minutes or so, and that's when he started sending me multiple messages at once, without a response from me first. He sent me a question mark, and then 15 minutes later, he sent another message that said hello with a question mark. I don't like when people do that, and it gives kind of a red flag to me, especially when it's someone you have never met before online. I then started ignoring him altogether because it made me a little uncomfortable. In my experience, when a guy does that and it's someone that you've never met, they are usually very needy and sometimes controlling. So I steered myself away and didn't think much of it. I was out on a walk with my dog at a nearby park that I usually take him to a few times a week. I live in an apartment, so I like to make sure he really gets the exercise he deserves. We took a short break by this bench where I sat down for a few minutes. Just enjoying the view, you know, and relaxing out in the nice spring weather for a moment, appreciating nature. Maybe after 10 minutes of sitting there, a random guy starts running my way. Emily, hey, is that you? It's me, Steve. I was just wondering what you were up to. Nice to meet you. What a coincidence, we just ran into each other, he said. Yeah, I said with a concerned look on my face. I started panicking because I knew something was wrong. This didn't feel like a coincidence. It didn't take long before I realized that he wasn't even the guy in the pictures. He had been catfishing me. That immediately sent a shiver down my spine, and I knew I was in for trouble. And then I remembered I had my Snapchat location turned on to all my friends. I forgot that I turned it on months ago to test something, and I forgot to turn it back off, apparently. This man was literally stalking me. He slowly started to harass me more and more, as he knew I was getting more frustrated and disinterested in him, and what he was asking me by the second. At first it was by asking if I still wanted to hang out. I ended up telling him to leave me alone and that he was scaring me. It didn't take long before he started yelling at me. I was honestly shook, and at this point I was in fight or flight mode. My dog started barking at him in order of an attempt to protect me. He backed up just a bit, but continued harassing me with his words. He began saying some very disgusting things that I don't care to even share right now. Just know they were really inappropriate and horrible things that you should never say to someone. Thankfully, some old man who was jogging by recognized I was being harassed and he scared him off. I'm so thankful for that man, because I don't know what else would have happened had someone not stepped in and intervened. The guy took off and I've never heard from him since, and I obviously blocked him on everything. I'm still on edge, and sometimes I worry I will run into him when I'm alone or something. Please just be careful who you talk to on the internet. This could happen anywhere, at any time. There are weirdos out there everywhere. This story is about my ex-boyfriend that started stalking me after our breakup. I don't really feel comfortable with sharing his name, just for safety reasons. We'd already been friends for a few years when we started dating my junior year of high school. After we started dating, it didn't take long at all for him to show his true colors. It was like a complete 360. He was a totally different person and not the nice guy I knew at all. He would go through my phone constantly. Every day it seemed he would snatch it out of my hands and read through all my personal stuff because of his own insecurities. I never once gave him a reason to worry about that sort of thing. I was always honest and loyal. I've been wanting to get out of this relationship pretty much ever since it started. Every time I would try to end things, he would guilt trip me and tell me that he would change. He would even go as far as lie to me about going to therapy and taking meds that were prescribed to him for his anger problems. It was constant lying and manipulative behavior from him. He would continuously accuse me of cheating the next day though, or sometimes even hours after telling me he would change. He would cuss at me, call me names, threaten suicide, and even threaten to physically harm me on a few separate occasions. He wasn't on drugs that I knew of, and to be completely honest, we were never really that close in our relationship, so I don't know what even sparked it in him to act like that, or why he thought it was acceptable. Finally, by my senior year, I was so done with him, I finally decided to break up with him. Yes, just like I thought it would, it made everything worse. Way, way worse. I thought he was crazy then, but holy smokes, I didn't even know human beings were capable of being this evil. I changed my phone number and I moved 45 minutes away with my best friend into a new apartment that we shared together. I was feeling hopeful and happy to finally be away from him. Within only a few days, he would randomly just show up where I was. The movie theater, the tennis court, and restaurants we have never even been to before. He would always just try to talk to me, but I would always just leave immediately and tell him I was busy. He would get furious when he saw me with another guy, no matter who it was. It could have been my cousin and he still would have lost his mind. Still to this day, I don't know how he knew where I was at all those times. It was really creepy, but he swore it was coincidental. A few months later, I moved off to college about an hour away. I thought it would all be over for sure now. But during my freshman year, one of our very close friends that we shared committed suicide. So I came home to attend the funeral. Of course he was there as well. I had no choice but to be nice to him and professional while we were there. After the funeral, everyone was going to one of my other friends' house for a little get-together and reunion. I didn't want to go, but my friends convinced me otherwise. The whole entire time I was there, my ex was trying to talk to me. I was being polite, but I would try to avoid him. He was right next to me all night, trying to kiss me, put his arm around me, and whatever he could get really. Someone at the party asked me if we were back together, and of course the whole room looked and turned directly at us. I said no, of course not, and stormed out. He got my number from someone somehow at the party and started texting me and calling and texting and calling and leaving voicemails with the same old sob stories. All the time. This continued for 5 years. I ended up moving out of state and I quit talking to everyone from back home, apart from a very select few amount of people that I wholeheartedly trust. The phone calls have finally stopped, hopefully for good. I still get anxious whenever I go back to my hometown and worry that I'm going to run into him again one day. One day I was crossing the street on my way home from campus, and there was a car stopped at the stoplight. The driver yelled out the window and asked if I wanted to party with him. I ignored him as I continued walking down the street. After walking for 2 blocks, the car drove up past me, did a 3-point turn, then pulled up onto the curb to stop me from walking. The driver then stepped out of the car, along with another man who was in the passenger seat. They asked me what my name was and asked again if I wanted to party with them. They were drinking, and they were apparently celebrating their friend's birthday, who was drunk off his butt in the back seat. They then all kept being even more persistent with me that I go party with them. This went on for a while, with them asking over and over and me rejecting them over and over. It obviously didn't need to last that long, but my first instinct was to keep it as peaceful as possible since I already had a lot to drink. And I know more than anyone that drunk people can be really unpredictable and that things could turn very badly very quick if I started being too aggressive. I managed to walk away from them when a car came up behind them and started to honk at them to move. It was a one-way residential road and the car couldn't go around because of oncoming cars. So I walked down a sketchy alleyway while they were figuring out the road situation in hopes that I would lose them. My sorority was just down the street, so I didn't want them seeing where I lived. I almost made it home, and I was pretty sure that I lost them, but as soon as I started walking up the steps to where I was staying for the time being, I heard a honk behind me and a car engine rev up and speed up to me. And of course, it was those same guys who were just harassing me. "Hey, where you going?" the driver said. "The party's this way." I opened my door and walked in quickly, slammed it shut and locked it. Thankfully and ironically enough, there was actually a police officer sitting across the street, witnessing everything that just happened. He pulled the driver over and started to question him. The driver ended up getting arrested for driving under the influence, and the other 2 in the car were free to go. I told the officer everything and that they were all harassing me. I also thanked him for his help. I just hope they don't come back, and I also hope they don't remember where I live. I don't live alone though, so that's always good, as we all know there is safety in numbers, but that doesn't necessarily stop me from losing sleep over my anxiety about the whole ordeal. It was my freshman year in high school, and it was just another normal day of school. As I was walking to my 3rd hour, the principal over the PA said there was an emergency and that we were doing an immediate lockdown. I started panicking a bit because it was still kind of a far walk to my next class. And I was late, so I was like the only one in the hallway. I almost ran into the bathroom, but I figured going to the library that was only a few extra steps down the hall would be a safer bet that I was willing to risk. This was the beginning of the year, so there was no way for me to know if this was a real lockdown or just a drill. But usually we do practice drills before the real thing, and they usually warn us ahead of time, so I had this really bad feeling. If I were to go to the bathroom, I would have most likely been alone, and anyone could have walked in at any time. So if there was someone dangerous lurking around, the only thing stopping them from getting to me would have been the stall door. I was hoping the library door wouldn't be locked when I got there, and that either a full class or at least one person would be there. Thankfully it wasn't locked, but there was no one there. I would be lying if I said I wasn't scared. I took my phone out and looked at the weather app to see if the lockdown could have been something weather related, but it wasn't. I sat there for a while just waiting for the PA to go off and for the principal to say that the drill was over. All of a sudden I heard footsteps from down the hall moving slowly towards my direction. I heard the library door open, and that was when my stomach started turning. I was trembling with anxiety, but I couldn't help but peek through the books from behind the shelf where I was hiding at. It was this creepy looking man in his late 40s, I would say. He quickly began searching the whole area. It turns out he was on drugs, and he was a parent of a kid that went to school here. I guess his son had been getting bullied by these same kids for years, and apparently him and his family had made endless complaints, but the district had never done anything about it. The only thing they seemed to do was give the kids multiple warnings. And of course, with the kid tattling on the kids who were bullying him, it made the bullying way worse. Apparently to the point where the kid tried to commit suicide multiple times. As soon as I saw this guy though, I knew something was wrong. Who was this random man? And was he armed with weapons? What was he doing? What does he want? Am I going to get hurt? These were all the things running in my head. I knew it was something bad because no one was supposed to be walking around during a lockdown. I didn't know at the time why he was there, but I could tell at that point that the lockdown was real, even just by the way he was walking around, and even by the way he looked. Plus, I've never seen him before, which is also a red flag because I know almost every teacher here, and he didn't look like a teacher at all. I could just tell he was up to no good, and that he was the reason we were having a lockdown. Luckily, he didn't see me, and he left the library after looking around for only a minute or two. The police caught him only a few minutes later. Apparently, he was caught with a dagger and some sort of pills. Now, I don't know if this part is true, but it was said that he told the police he was coming after those kids who had been bullying his son for all these years. I guess he had enough of his kid being bullied, but man, that is not the right way to go about something like that. I feel bad for the kid who has been getting bullied all these years, but I'm glad that man got caught before something horrible happened. Someone that would do something as crazy as that would be very unpredictable, I'm sure. And they could be capable of just about anything. So I'm just glad he didn't see me in that library. School is supposed to be somewhere you feel safe. That was definitely the most intense and scariest thing that has ever happened to me in my life. One day, when I was at school, I think it was my sophomore year, I was sitting in class when my friend Josh texted me and asked if I wanted to hang out after school. I said yes, and that I just had to talk to my mom first. So the plan was, we were just going to hang out at the nearby park until our other friend Carson got out of football practice. And then we were all going to walk to a nearby restaurant downtown area, less than a mile from the park. Josh and I were bored and goofing off at the park while we were waiting for Carson to get done with practice. We started playing basketball, just shooting around and warming ourselves up, because we were about to play a one-on-one game versus each other. All of a sudden, this random older man started walking towards us. This guy was probably like 30 years old or so, and immediately I was wondering in my head what he was wanting, because we were only 15 and he was a stranger. So of course, initially I was a little creeped out and on edge with my guard up. He started talking to us, and he said that he used to be a basketball coach for a high school team just a few cities away from us. He asked us what we were doing, and I told him we were about to play a game while we wait for our friend. He wasn't being weird at first, he kinda just started shooting with us and cracking jokes. Okay, he's not too bad, I thought. He was just a random dad who was probably bored, nothing bad. Only a short while after, my friend had to leave because his mom called him, and apparently he was in trouble for something that happened at school, and apparently he wasn't even supposed to be hanging out with me anyways. So he left. It was just me and this guy. He told me his name was Matthew, but I later found out that it wasn't true. I started getting anxious when my friend left. Almost right after he left, Matthew asked me a strange question. Hey, what do you say we go to my house? You and my son would get along. I have a basketball hoop and we can all play. I'm just parked right over there, and I live a few minutes down the road, he said. And I kid you not, he pointed at this creepy looking old white van. Yes, he really had an old creeper van. It was in this moment exactly that I knew for a fact that something was seriously wrong. I told him no and maybe some other time because I was waiting for my friend. He insisted. Why don't you just hang out with him some other time? Seriously, you remind me so much of my son and he really needs cool friends like you, he said. He then let out this very weird laugh and gave me the creepiest smile ever. I told him no. I started running away and screaming for help. It drew a lot of attention and some adults quickly rushed over to me. It was a family that was on a picnic with their 2 young children that were way younger than I was. The guy, who told me his name was Matthew, ran off to his car and sped away quickly before they could get a good look at his license plate. They potentially saved my life, and I am forever thankful for that. Luckily, I wasn't naive, and also that there were people around. Good people that helped me. The lady's husband whom I was with called the police when I told them what happened, and the lady was helping me calm down and call my mom. I called my mom and she rushed to me immediately from work. My mom and I went home after talking to the police. I gave the officer every bit of detail I possibly could about what happened and about what he looked like. A few months later, the man was broadcasted on the news for over 5 separate kidnappings that all took place within 2 years. Apparently he had literally been kidnapping boys and girls and keeping them locked in a basement. I'm not going to get into any detail with that, just know it was extremely gruesome and perverted. I still think about this every day. Some days it consumes me, and I have nightmares about him most nights. He's in prison now though, and he will be for a very, very long time. I can't believe there are people out there that are that sick in the head. Growing up, I wasn't exactly a social butterfly, and even to this day, most people would probably consider me as pretty antisocial altogether. I was never sure why, but I have always been this way. Sometimes I get lonely, but I still prefer to be alone. When I was in college, I mostly just kept to myself. I had a few friends, but I wasn't super close with anyone there. One day, on my lunch break, after I got my food and found a table to sit down at so I could eat, I started feeling awkward. More awkward than I usually did at lunch. I was used to not sitting with anyone, but I had been eating at this table for like 5 minutes, and I was the only person at the table. My social anxiety crept up, so I was trying to finish my food quickly so I could go back to my dorm. I had this weird feeling, like someone was watching me. I turned around, and behind me was this guy staring directly at me. I gave him a confused look for a moment and turned back around. I finished my food and got up and threw my garbage away. I looked to my right and briefly scanned the cafeteria room. There he was. That same guy who was just behind me staring at me was staring at me again. He whispered something to the guy that was next to him, and they both looked at me with this very angry look on their face. What the heck, I thought to myself. I've never seen either of these two guys in my life, so I didn't know what their problem was. I thought maybe he had an issue with me, or maybe that they were just laughing at me. I have been a victim to bullies all my life, so bear with me if you think I'm being paranoid. Nothing else happened though, except for me being really confused. But I tried not to think of it much and went back to my dorm. Later that night, as I was lying awake in my bed trying to sleep, I couldn't sleep at all, and I had been laying there for what felt like hours. I decided to get up and move around for a second. My anxiety was getting the best of me, so I thought I should go sit down outside for a bit and get some fresh air. I found this bench that was towards the far east side of campus that I've never seen before. It was right under some trees, right before the entrance of what looked like to be a trail of some sort. After a few minutes of sitting there, I saw somebody in the distance, standing by the campus building under a yellow tinted light. It was pretty dark outside, so it was kind of eerie. They were just staring at me for like a solid minute or two straight without moving a muscle. Then they started running at me. I just sat there and didn't move. What do you want?" I yelled. As he started getting much closer to me, I sat up and started walking backwards a bit. "Hey man, take it easy. What's going on?" I soon realized it was the same guy who was staring at me earlier in the cafeteria. He grabbed me by the shirt, hit me in the face at least 4 or 5 times and broke my nose, took my phone and my wallet. He didn't say anything at all to me the entire time. He then took off, and after that I never seen him again. When the coast was clear and I got myself together, I went back to my dorm and told my roommate what just happened. I explained everything to him, and he said we should call campus security so we can get the police involved. I told him I wanted to wait till the morning. I was trying my best to describe the guy that did this to me to him the best I could, but he had no idea who I was talking about. I talked to the dean the next day and told him everything. He told me he would look at the cameras and get back to me as soon as possible. So I left his office and went throughout my day waiting to hear from him. When he finally got back with me, he said that he saw me out on the cameras that night, but said there was no one else out there with me last night, and even accused me of lying. I was so confused. I tried to tell him I wasn't lying, but he kept cutting me off every time I spoke and threatened me with suspension for lying and wasting his time. He showed me the video and skimmed through it with me and showed me there was no one else out there that entire time I was outside. After a bit of bickering back and forth between the two of us, I started freaking out and ran back to my dorm. I gave my roommate the update of what happened later that night between me and the dean, and I'm pretty sure he thinks I'm insane, and I think everyone else thinks I am too. I literally had a black eye and a broken nose and everything, but no one believed me at all. I really think everyone all thought that I had did this to myself or something. But the weirdest thing about this whole situation that still gets me to this day is, like I said, I never saw that guy again, and nobody knew who I was talking about when I would describe him. Any friends that I had cut me off pretty much, as they thought I was attention seeking and weird or crazy. I've never been the same since that day. I don't know what the hell to make of this situation at all, and I don't think I ever will.